in the world. We're getting streaming on YouTube. Here we go. Bibbidi bobbidi, bibbidi bobbidi. Bibbidi bobbidi, bibbidi bobbidi, bibbidi bobbidi boo. And of course, I've got my little pug here. He's going to make everything real fun, real interesting for all of us down here. Hope you guys are doing well out there. Well, I made a big mistake. I made a big mistake last night. I 100% got some bad news. Good to see you. Right after the stream, my friend and boss told me, I'm not going to tell you the whole story because I can't really, I don't want to out people and make it a big thing, but long story short, a friend of mine that I work with did something stupid and is going to lose, well, is on leave at least, and that has made it so that I've got to come in and do more capitalism and cover, and we're in a frantic scramble now. And I made the dumb decision when getting this bad news to go and buy a couple of drinks for myself, drown your sorrows. And that made today really bad. I've just got to stop drinking. It's just the long and short of it. I just have to stop drinking. I have to say to myself, nope, it's not helping. It doesn't even make, when I drink, it doesn't feel fun. It doesn't make it better. Doesn't help. I'm not enjoying myself. And then the next day I basically lose. I felt like I lost today, I did a bit of a workout and I feel good about that and that's fine. But I basically just lounged around kind of with a headache and recovering from it. So I just feel like the lesson for me is I've got to just say no. Say no to drugs, kids. That's what's important out there in the world. Say no to drugs. While I'm out there, like, share, subscribe, right? Hit the bell, hit the whistle, hit the thing. And if you've got $1 jangling around your pocket, think about donating. If you're donating one, maybe make it two. I hope you guys are doing really, really well. I'm having a bummer of a day. I gotta tell you. Having a bummer of a day. And I'm not the only one, though. I complain about my kind of things, about my troubles, about what's going on in the world. Well, looks like everybody's having a tough go. Meth-related ER visits on the rise in Ontario, following Western Canada trend. Isn't that fun? Good to see you, Stas. Amphetamine-related visits to Ontario emergency departments have skyrocketed over the last 2 decades, a recent study published in the Canadian Journal of Psychiatry says. It's astonishing, says lead author James Crispo, a postdoctoral research fellow in pharmaceutical studies at the University of British Columbia, who's based in Sudbury. The researchers used health administrative data to review adult emergency department visits throughout Ontario between January 2003 and December 2020. What they found that the number of ER patients suffering from an amphetamine-related condition increased almost 15 times over that time period. Because they eliminated prescription amphetamines, which are sometimes used to treat ADHD, researchers believe the majority of the emergency department visits were specifically due to methamphetamine, or meth, a stimulant street drug which has become increasingly prevalent in Canada. The study showed an especially sharp increase between 2015 and 2020. Why, did something happen? Did something happen between 2015 and 2020? Good to see you grinning. Content, if you got to drink things that taste good, especially alcohol. If you're going to do it for flavor, not for buzz. Yeah, I kind of found myself, I'm thinking to myself, why did I even have the drinks? I didn't even have that many, And I just feel like I didn't really get anything out of it. And I just ended up with a headache and feeling shitty today. And so what's the point? What's the point? That guy, good to see you, bud. Good to see you. And of course, there's no mystery to anybody about why meth and methamphetamine related events are coming. It seems like you have to be a highly educated politician to miss the forest for the trees on this one. If you make the society shitty and you make everything terrible for everyone, if you make it so that no one has anything going on and you flood the market with meth, it's, what do you think's going to happen? What do you really think is going to happen? I feel like what we're watching is a society fall into 100 years of humiliation. That during the 100 years of humiliation, one of the ways in which the imperial powers kept China in check was by flooding the market with opium and getting people addicted to opium. Well, now it's meth, and they're doing the same thing, but they're doing it to their own people, because the actual society now isn't Canada or America or any of this. It's the country of Richistan, right? The country of Richistan. Like if you're one of these multi-billionaire people and you can go off to Jeffrey Epstein's island, you're not really tied to Canada anymore. You're not really tied to America anymore as a country, right? You're just tied into this absurdist, ridiculous notion that you're a better person because you have money. And so you might as well flood the market with meth, make a bunch of money selling meth, right? These guys are essentially drug dealers on the side, all of them. It's gotten absurd and ridiculous. Good opportunity to say like the stream, guys. I know I just said this to the first batch, so here's the second batch. Make sure you hit the like button, okay? Hit the like button, hit the share button, do what you can. If you've got $1 jangling around in that pocket, think about donating it. These are the tough times. And meanwhile, who said, John, did you just use the phrase educated politician? That doesn't seem right to me. Oh yeah, politicians are well educated in being stupid, right? Like they're extremely well educated. They all have degrees. They all have high level degrees in being illiterate morons. You have to be a politician in this environment. Hey Zach, how you doing, bud? How many more banks will fail? I think another 3, but I'm hoping for 100%. Yeah, we'll see how it goes, right? Like, given how quickly they responded, to bailing out the failed banks, the banks are completely unincentivized to succeed. They have no incentive whatsoever to be successful. That they can do whatever they like, and if they fail, they know they're going to get hundreds of billions of dollars. I actually have like a really great infograph here that really, I think, puts a real pin in this. I'm going to move this over here because I still want to discuss that. What could $220 billion have paid for instead of bank bailouts? On the left hand, you have $150 billion went to the Silicon Valley Bank bailout. $70 billion went to Signature Bank bailout, right? Well, $24 billion could have done student loan forgiveness. $85 billion could have repaired school infrastructure. $20 billion for paid family leave. $40 billion for childcare and universal pre-K. $24 billion for dental coverage for seniors, and $22 billion to 2 years free community college. So there's all kinds of things that we could have done with the 22 billion or the 220 billion that we handed out to bank executives for sucking at their job, right? And of course, we didn't nationalize them. We're not doing anything to punish them. And so we're basically just taking money away from the public and giving it to worthless losers who are going to lose the money again because they're stupid. Because we're a society that worships stupidity. Like, here is a very clear-cut example of what I mean when I say that we are a society that worships stupidity, that we worship stupidity. It is a stupid idea from the very outset, from the beginning. It is a stupid thing to think. It is a stupid way to act. It is a stupid thing to do. To take the kind of money that we are taking and handing it to people for failing. That is an extraordinarily stupid thing to do. While we have lots of things going on in the society that need actual serious care. For example, we've got a breaking news story. A freight train has derailed on the Swinomish Reservation north of Seattle. The train, run by Warren Buffett's BNSF, has reportedly leaked over 5,000 gallons of diesel since the derailment. So this doesn't deserve a look at. This event doesn't deserve the attention of the federal government. This doesn't deserve the attention of any kind of provincial government. This doesn't deserve our eyes on it. This doesn't deserve any attention whatsoever. But if a bunch of bankers bet on crypto and lose their money doing it because it's a stupid thing to do, then oh my God, we have to make sure that we bail these guys out. We can't have rich people not be rich anymore. Oh my God, they'll have to go get jobs and do something important and actually help the economy in a meaningful way. Yeah, this is what I love. I love looking over at the TikTok chat. There's been no communist successful experiment, right, bud? Stop paying attention to the CIA, okay, bud? Just stop paying attention to the CIA. Right now, you've literally got China eating our lunch. I don't know what to tell. I don't know what to tell people anymore. Just like take the blinders off, right? Take the blinders off. The Soviet Union was the first nation into space. Like I don't know what to tell you anymore. They defeated the Nazis. Like they literally were ruled by kings, and then were able to defeat the Nazis in a single generation. Like I don't know what you need to see. I just think you're so heavily propagandized by the CIA. You're so heavily propagandized by anti-communist propaganda that you just refuse to see what is patently obvious right in front of your face. Like, to say that the Soviet Union was a failure, to say that what's going on in China is a failure, I just think you've got to be blind. Willfully blind. Willfully blind. Thanks, Adam. I appreciate that, bud. Yeah, politicians are god-tier charlatans. Yeah, that's what they're trained in, right? Who is more fascist, UK or USA? Technically speaking, it's the UK right now. Because the UK is, like, at least Joe Biden is, like, a career politician, right? He works for Goldman Sachs. He isn't from Goldman Sachs. You know, at least the United States still has sort of the veneer of being like, yes, it's okay to protest, and yes, it's okay to do these things. Whereas in the UK, they've banned that practice. So if you go out in the streets and protest in the UK, you get picked up, right? Like, the UK is farther along the fascist line for sure. Like, for sure. And, but, like, the United States is pretty close behind. That you should look at the UK as the trajectory of where neoliberal capital is going to take us. That we are going to do the same stuff. Except it's America, so we're going to do it with bombasticity, and we're going to be outrageous about it. Yeah, look at Z. All anti-communism essentially boils down to I hate poor people and I hate non-white people. Yeah, it does seem to have that kind of a quality about it. That, like, the only reason anybody cares about the wars going on in Europe right now is because white people are involved, right? We don't give a shit if it's brown people. Like, we don't care at all. You can go into any country where there's brown people and coup their government, overthrow them, destroy them, and say it's that they're better off for it. Like, that's how we roll here in the West. And then you end up with people talking about then you have people who just, like, talk about how communism a complete and total failure, because it doesn't matter that 800 million Chinese people were lifted out of poverty, right? Because they hate poor people. So that's not a victory as far as they're concerned. They don't view that as a success. That if you're standing up saying that communism doesn't work, it is because you think that poor people should be poor, and it's right that they're poor. It really is that simple. And I'm tired of pretending like that's not the case. That we despise the poor, and it flows right into the worship of money. That the only method, literally the only method that we use to decide who is good or who is bad in the society is how much money they have. And so if you have a lot of money, and it doesn't matter if you're Jeffrey Epstein or not, right? If you have a lot of money, then you're good. And if you don't have money, then you're bad. And it's that simple. And the idea that we'll take money away from people who have $100 billion and give it to people who don't have enough to buy a loaf of bread, well, that's reprehensible, right? That's absolutely reprehensible. And then these same people will clutch onto a Bible that tells them give your money to the poor explicitly and love your neighbor as yourself explicitly, and pretend as though that's not what it says. Like, it's just, yep, the death of the dollar, Matthias. The death of the dollar is literally around the corner, and yet the capitalist fanboys remain. Yep, it's shocking to watch. Like, there's a scene in like a Monty Python movie. I don't think it was a Monty Python movie, but it was a Monty Python actor where they were on an island and the island was sinking, right? And all of the inhabitants of the island were denying that it was sinking the entire time. and the characters were screaming at these people, come onto the boat, come onto the boat, your island is sinking. And literally as they sink into the water, they're saying, no, the island's not sinking. And that's what these guys remind me of. Just these absolutely clueless rubes, watching the society collapse and crumble around them. All of the evidence is on the table. Even like the New York Times is talking about how it's happening. We literally have, I've literally got an article here now, let me see if I can find it straight away, where even Goldman Sachs is beginning to degrade, America's position economically. Do I actually have it? No, I'm full of shit. But I saw an article just today where some of the highest banks in the world are beginning to say, yeah, the growth potential for the United States is actually really, really bad, and it's going to be better in China, right? It's going to be better in China. And America is just doing it to itself. It's just doing it to itself. That there's all kinds of things that it could do to prevent this, but it just chooses not to, right? See, I love this kind of, economic systems have been around for thousands of years. Communism hasn't. I wonder why. Because they keep bombing it. I don't know what to tell you, but like this to me is like the number one thing that's really shocking about what's happening in modern America is the inability of the intellectual class to actually be serious and to actually seriously grapple with what's in front of them and actually have a serious adult conversation about what's happening. Like that's the most shocking part about it. That the CIA propaganda has been so successful that no one is willing to even acknowledge reality any longer. And so we've ended up with an intellectual class that is incapable of actually grappling seriously with the issue. And it's just, again, it's this worship of stupidity. That I talk about it all the time, the trifecta, right? It's the worship of money, the worship of the individual, and the worship of stupidity. And we have to be stupid. Like, we have to. Because if we stopped being stupid, then we would stop worshiping the individual and we would stop worshiping money. And the whole system is based on the worship of money and the worship of the individual. And so we have to be stupid, right? It's a self-reinforcing circle. It's three pillars that reinforce themselves. And if you chop one away, the other two have to go. And so what you end up with is you end up with extremely rich people congratulating themselves for their own success, acting like stupid idiots. Like, that's what we've ended up with. Yeah, the death of the dollar, yeah, I'm looking forward to it myself. Let's make it happen. Like, the USD can't die fast enough. It's going to be horrible. Like, I'm straight up, it's going to be horrible. Like, it's going to be absolutely brutal. And I think the thing that's going to be the scariest is you've got a lot of these pro-capitalist simps who are going to, like liberals, for example, right? Like still kind of pro-capitalist simps who are going to bend the knee to fascists. That fascists are going to come up with the solutions that fascists come up with. And liberals are, in their cowardice and illiteracy and stupidity, are absolutely going to turn around and bend the knee to those guys. And these guys will be very forceful and have all these ideas. And, you know, like one of the reasons why Peterson gets as far as he does is because he says stupid things with force. And it seems that if you just say something with confidence, people will go along with it, right? People will go along with it. Protesters have been getting beat up by police in France a lot lately, too. The West in general is essentially fascist at this point. Well, I mean, what happened in the West? I have this article here, right? So today, Macron, Paris is drowning in trash because the bin men have gone on permanent strikes against retirement increases. France's Macron overrides Parliament in an effort to pass retirement age bill. So they're trying to raise the age of retirement in France because fascism is awesome, isn't it? Like, we love fascism. Old people need to work longer, right? Like, that's the way it works because we got to make sure that bank bailout, we have enough money to bail out people for banks. That's really what it is. Jeffrey Epstein's island doesn't pay for itself, guys. And this is essentially the result, right? This is essentially the result. You end up with thousands and thousands and thousands of people in the streets of Paris, literally fires in the background. We've got reports now. Paris is drowning in trash because the bin men have gone on permanent strike against the retirement increases. France's energy bills are 50% of ours. They retire 6 years earlier. Their pension is 2 times higher. Yet they still strike. Why are they better off? Because they strike. Like, there just comes a point where we have to acknowledge that, like, if the only way to actually get things done in the society is to have these kinds of mass scale protests, then there might be something wrong with your society, right? That the system is obviously non-responsive. That it's not actually responding to the needs of the people if the people feel the need to do these sorts of things in order to actually get listened to at all. I love it. We've got a good debate going on in the in the chat, right? Like, and I don't know. I don't even tune into TikTok from time to time because every time I glance over at TikTok, it's just like, oh my god. I hope you guys are doing well out in TikTok land. I hope everything's going well. That's kind of wild, actually. I don't understand what's going on with TikTok, dude. I look over. I've got 9 viewers. It seems to be 9 people. I have 1,000 likes. Is that right? Like 1,000 likes? I don't understand how that happens. I don't understand what's going on with TikTok. TikTok's going to get banned anyway. Like, that's what's crazy about America. We believe in free speech and the freedom of everybody to be free and free. And by the way, we're banning TikTok. Freedom. Like, it's crazy. I keep coming to the conclusion that the USA is democratic fascism. It's not democratic. Like, what the United States has is not a democracy. It has sort of the trappings of democracy, but it's not democracy. That the only people who can actually run in the system have to be ultra wealthy in the first place. If you don't have money, then you can't get anywhere in the American system. And so in no way is it democratic. That it's just billionaires negotiating with one another. Like, it's democratic insofar as the billionaire class is concerned, I suppose, because it allows them to figure out how to split up the spoils. But it's not democratic insofar as a system that actually responds to the needs of the populace, right? Kevin Alexander, good to see you. Good opportunity, guys. Like, share, subscribe, right? Hit the bells, hit the whistles. If you've got $1 jangling around that pocket, think about donating, okay? If you want a guy out in the world who's actually doing this full time, who's actually confronting the political class with communist ideas, then you need to donate, right? That this needs to become my full-time job. And if you think I'm capable of it, then think about donating. It's in the description. I have a survival plan for when a shit hits the fan. Hopefully, I'll have enough to help others too. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it all works. Yeah, Shapiro accused the collapse of these banks on wokeness. Yeah, say something that stupid should earn someone a public caning. Yeah, this is because it's all they have left, right? They can't actually discuss the issue with seriousness. They can't actually talk about what's actually happening. So they've got to say stupid stuff because it's all they have left. There isn't a narrative that makes sense other than the narrative that is real, right? That you have a bunch of banks that keep making bad bets and doing stupid shit because that's what capitalists are. That's what they do. They can't help themselves. And of course it goes tits up and the whole thing explodes. And now we're getting bailed out. And the idea that's happening because this convinces me more and more. I've said it on this podcast before. I've said it on this stream before. I'll say it again. That I don't have the smoking gun. I don't have the absolute, just like, it's 100% the truth, that 100% the CIA is hypnotizing people with buzzwords. Like, I don't have, like, the smoking gun on that, but we know that the CIA has a long history of working with mind control. Like, we saw what happened with the Church Commission. We have lots of evidence to show that the CIA is interested in using technology and using drugs in order to hypnotize people, create sleeper agents, to mess with people on a consciousness level. We know the CIA does this, and it's completely believable to me that these smartphones are hypnotizing people so that when they hear their trigger word, they hear woke, they hear communism, they hear socialism, that it just triggers they hear welfare, that it just triggers something inside of their brain and they just turn into a monkey that's just like, that's bad. That's a bad thing. He said the word that makes me feel bad, and it's bad. And it's just like that. Like, it's just like that. That a huge section of the populace is completely susceptible to falling for propaganda and falling for hypnotism. And it's stuff like this that makes me believe that is actually the case. That Shapiro is just saying the banks are collapsing because woke. And everybody goes, oh, it's woke! Woke did it! Woke did it! And that's all they need to hear. They just need to hear the word woke. And then it triggers the thing in their brain that's been implanted because of the hypnotism from staring at these fucking flickering apps. Like, it's either that or we're just so fucking stupid, right? So pick your poison. So this is where I'll land on it, is that I'm not saying that is exactly what is happening, but I'm saying that if we did a church commission and there was like Operation Mind Bend, and it turned out that that's exactly what the CIA was doing, and I had a document, I wouldn't say nah at all. I'd be like, yep, here it is. And I wouldn't be like, whoa, you'll never believe. I literally be like, hey guys, remember that thing that I've been talking about for a decade? Here it is. Called it. That's what I'd be saying. Because just all the facts are there. Like, everything is right there. Anyway, says Compton, these capitalism fans, what does it have to take for them to consider that the market might need direct intervention? Yeah. What is the acceptable proof to consider something must be done? Yeah. Like, I ask myself that all the time. Like, what is it going to take? Like, what is it going to take for these guys to recognize that their system is failing? And honestly, I think for most of them, it's going to take something bad happening to them, not to their neighbor, not to someone in their town, not to someone in their church group, like not to someone around them, right? It's going to have to happen to them. And I think the big reason why that's the case is because we're in a society that worships the individual, right? So these people who worship the self themselves can always say, well, a bad thing is happening to them, they must have done something wrong. And I'm better than them because something bad is not happening to me. And so I'm doing the right thing and they're doing the wrong thing. And they just need to do the right thing. That's why all the advice is always just like, well, just get a better job. Well, just you must be doing something wrong, right? What's wrong with you? You got to stand up straight with your shoulders back. Like, all the advice is like that. That there's no systemic or collective critique to be done because these people worship the self. They worship themselves. And it won't be until something bad happens directly to them. And literally not even like their son. Like not even like their family members. Not even people who are around them that they can see with their eyes and be told what's happening. That it's going to happen to them in front of their eyes and make it come down to the point where they are confronted with the reality that, oh wait, this is out of my control. That I'm doing the best that I can, just like everybody's doing the best that they can, and I've been confronted by a system that's abandoning me. And it's not going to be until that happens to these guys that they're finally going to hear what their sons and daughters and wives and uncles and neighbors are actually saying to them. Because what we are looking at is a type of fundamentalism, a worship of the self. Like, they are as bad as the people who think that Jesus Christ is coming back at any moment. But instead of the icon being Jesus Christ, it's themselves. Like, and if that makes it sound like a high-level narcissist, yeah, welcome aboard. These people are sociopaths. Like, that's the society we have. That the most successful people are just outright sociopathic. It's the worship of the self, the worship of the individual. Yeah, you can't argue someone out of something they didn't reason themselves into. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 12 people in chat, 6 likes. Come on, guys. It's a button. Hit the button. Just it's free to do. I'm not even asking you for money. Although now I'm asking you for money. Make sure you give me money. It's in the description. You like how I did that? That was smooth. Thanks, Grinning. I appreciate it, bud. Yeah, MK Ultra is wild. This is the thing that's the craziest part about being a leftist, if you ask me. That so much of the shit that exists in the discourse is stuff that the CIA has admitted. Like, if you stand up and say some of the stuff, people still act like you're crazy, and it's like, what are you talking about? They confessed to it. Like, they confessed. Like, what do you need? There comes a point where you're just like, people just don't want to believe that there could be such dark evil in the world. They certainly don't want to believe that a major institution in their society that they are helping pay for and continuing to pretend is somehow benefiting them is actually doing this extremely dark shit. Like, MK Ultra is like anytime you start talking about like the Nazis or in this day and age it's the Soviets, right? The KGB, you'll never believe. Well, they weren't doing this shit. They weren't even coming close to the shit that MK Ultra was doing. Like, the CIA is a dark, demonic organization that seems pretty happy about being that way, and yet we're supposed to take seriously that. I love it when people say things like, "Oh, explain to me how capitalism's failed." Like, the CIA as an organization still exists. Like, there's all the evidence you would ever need. But Marie, good to see you. Grinning says, Credit Suisse got a socialized bailout. Yeah. Shared actually went up. People invested. BS. Yeah. Liking is praxis. Liking is praxis. Hope you guys are all doing well out there in TikTok land. Let's take a quick look. Have you ever lived in a communist country? Oh my goodness. Because you can't learn something from the people who actually live there. So, in the news, speaking of communist countries, in the news, Global Civilization Initiative proposed by Xi Jinping, provides hope to heal the world in turbulence. Full disclosure, this is from the Global Times, so this is the Chinese press themselves saying this. Xi Jinping, General Secretary of the Communist Party of China, Central Committee, and Chinese President, proposed the Global Civilization Initiative. Experts said following the Global Development Initiative and the Global Security Initiative, China is trying to share its wisdom and plans to bring new hope for all nations to consider together on how to escape the track of the clash of civilizations and find a path that can help the world sail through the current turbulence. Xi proposed the initiative during his keynote speech on Wednesday at the opening ceremony of the CPC in dialogue with the World Political Party's high-level meeting via video link and delivered a keynote address. Under the initiative, Xi called for respect for diversity of civilizations, advocating the common values of humanity, highly valuing the inheritance and innovation of civilizations, and jointly advocating robust international people-to-people exchanges and cooperations. I think it's amazing that they're using the word civilizations. That's what I think is actually amazing. They're actually talking about peoples as outside of the concept of the nation state. That these are civilizations. That these are groups of people who are evolving and changing over time. And I think that's a really beautiful way of discussing it. We have, according to Xinhua News Agency story on Thursday, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, also president of the African National Congress, and 11 other leaders of political parties and political organizations also addressed the dialogue on Wednesday. They spoke highly of Xi's proposals in his keynote speech and expressed their willingness to work with the CPC to play a leading and driving role in the modernization process. We fully agree with the 4 proposals put forward by Chinese President Xi and the Global Civilization Initiative, Ramaphosa said, noting the initiative is vital to the world today. Like, can you imagine if the West was doing anything like this? I've never seen the West say any of this kind of stuff and talk about this kind of stuff, about how we need to actually, like, build civilizations and work together, right? China is not just proposing the initiatives, but also making a contribution through actions and gaining concrete achievements, analysts said. For instance, the successful mediation that led to the resumption of diplomatic ties
between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and the Belt and Road Initiative that links countries with different civilizations to jointly realize development. Like, this resumption of diplomatic ties between Saudi Arabia and Iran cannot be overstated. Like, during the recent history of what was happening in the Middle East, that traditionally Saudi Arabia and Iran have been enemies, that they have been at odds with one another, constantly in a power struggle for who is the leader, essentially, of the region. Like, who's the hegemon of the region. And here's China coming in and convincing both of these groups, who have, again, traditionally been enemies with one another, traditionally at odds with one another, to actually put that aside and begin communicating with one another in the hopes of building a stronger alliance with one another. That's actually brilliant. That, like, when America goes to the Middle East, it drops bombs. When China goes to the Middle East, it builds rail. Like, and people have the absolute audacity and the absolute gall to be like, tell me one country where communism works. You're dumb. Like, you're dumb. Like, it's right in front of your face. It's right in front of your eyes. There is a country that is building thousands of miles of rail, that is forging diplomatic ties, that is using diplomacy, that is building up other nations and themselves, lifting their own citizens out of poverty, building entire cities out of nothing. Communism's never worked. Communism never worked. Like, just ignoring the fact, like, ignoring the enormous history of the West just carpet bombing communist nations. Like, the carpet bombing of Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Literally the United States saying out loud in public to everyone that they are going to carpet bomb these regions to staunch the spread of communism. Communism never works. That's why we spend hundreds of billions of dollars to stop it. Like, the worship of stupidity is just absolutely incredible. It's a very potent force. Like, that is why I, like, as I have been thinking about this trinity, this unholy trinity of the capitalist death cult, that for a little while I was considering stupidity as just kind of a sideshow, that the two pillars were really the worship of the individual and the worship of money. But over time, I really came to see that, like, no, stupidity is as important. It is just as important a pillar as the worship of money and the worship of the self. That we have to worship stupidity, because if we don't, the whole thing doesn't work. That it really is a trifecta. And this statement of show me a place where communism works. What are you talking about? Like, you have to be stupid to not see it. Like, you have to be stupid. On purpose. And there just comes a point where it has to be on purpose. That there is a country out there, and people can't believe that it exists. I think that's the biggest thing. Because we're supposed to be the best, right? We're the greatest country in the world. We have a manifest destiny. When we go into regions, people bow and worship us, right? This is the way we think about ourselves. So it can't be believed that there's a nation that's actually treating African nations like peers. What are you even talking about? African nations are supposed to be exploited. They're better off for being exploited, in fact. That's the way we talk about it, right? So we simply can't believe that there is a nation that's going into other nations and being like, hey, can we have mutual development? Can we actually work together? Right? And if you're skeptical of that claim, if you're skeptical of the claim that African nations, well, they must be getting exploited by the Chinese, well, you should listen to what the African nations themselves have to say about it. Right? Do you know what the African nations have to say about the West? They talk about a long history of slavery, genocide, and exploitation. As recently as condemning Bill Gates himself, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, for their failures to actually do anything in Africa, right? As recently as this year, they're condemning the West. Meanwhile, we're looking forward to developing with China, is what they're saying. Like, what do you need to see? Like, what do you need to see to have your little wake-up moment? to recognize that what you have been thinking and how you've been looking at the world is stupid. And the reason why you refuse to acknowledge that the way you're thinking of the world is stupid is because the moment you recognize that, the moment you'll recognize how stupid it is to worship yourself, and the moment you'll realize how stupid it is to worship money, and that's the moment you'll recognize that your society has failed. And so you can't do it. You can't do it because it's more difficult to live with the truth. That's the hard reality, is that you're taking the easy way out. That you're just going to keep walking around with your brain shut off, consuming CIA propaganda, saying the little shill buzz lines, because it's easier. It lets you live in the world like a fat, lazy burger eater. That's all it takes. All you got to do is wake up and go do the shit you're told to do and go home and drink and watch Netflix. That's all you got to do. It's easy. You know what's far more difficult? Acknowledging the truth of the situation. Because if you acknowledge the truth of the situation, then you've got a choice. And your choice is either to be a fascist, right? Which, incidentally, America is the Nazis on the world stage. No doubt. Like, absolutely no doubt. So your choice is to just decide to be a fascist, or to do something about it. Or to just to collapse into nihilism. You can choose that route too if you like. Yeah, the most cynical take about what China is doing is that they're trying to avert World War III. I know, right? How dare China attempt to avert World War III? Transylvanian, good to see you. Notice how China speaks of civilizations in the plural. You don't hear that in the West. Here we usually acknowledge only one civilization, ours, and everything outside that are barbarians. Yeah, the terrorists, the axis of evil. Yeah. And everything's discussed in the nation-state system in the West, because the nation-state system is what the West created. That the West created nations so that they could basically carve up the spoils. And they don't want to hear tell of civilizations. They don't want to hear tell of some system that exists outside of the nation-state system. Because if people start believing in the idea that, oh, well, civilizations exist and it's a little bit more messy than just lines on a map, then they can't manipulate the narrative so easily. For the West, the definition of civilization has become synonymous with free market capitalism and liberal democracy. No other model is accepted. This is the mentality of fundamentalist zealots. Yeah, and I don't think the West believes in the concept of civilization. Barbarians can't acknowledge the existence of civilization, right? We are the barbarians, no doubt. Like, we just wear suits, that's all. Like, and if you're a barbarian and you think that the barbarian way of life is the best way to be, then the concept of civilization is the antithesis of that. So this is why we're talking about quote-unquote free market capitalism. Like, all the language that they use, if you just take it and distill it to its base meaning and articulate it the way that a barbarian would articulate it, it's all the same, right? Free market capitalism. Let the market decide. How is that any different than just saying, let chaos reign, the strong shall survive, right? The weak will die, the strong will win. That's what free market capitalism is. Once you actually distill out the clean, sterilized language, once you actually take it out of the priesthood and you give it to the barbarians, you understand pretty fast that it's the strong will survive and let chaos reign. That's all it means, right? And the concept of liberal quote unquote democracy is basically just go into a region, destroy it, and tell them to do what we and have them do what we say. And if they won't do what we say, then we'll destroy it more. That's the whole point. That's the entire point of quote unquote liberal democracy. So it is a type of fundamentalism without a doubt. But what do you expect from a group of people who still believe that angels are real and Jesus Christ is coming back at any moment, right? That some of the wealthiest people in the society and some of the best positioned people in the society are literally people who talk like this on television. that they look at the television screen and they say, what's happening in the world today is from the devil. The devil has come down from the mountaintop where the volcano lives, and he's here to tempt you in your heart. And the devil, when he says to you, maybe it's true that the Muslims have something to say. Maybe it's true that the Chinese have something to say. Well, I'm here to tell you that right now the only person you need to listen to is your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And I pray to Jesus now to reach into your heart and say unto you, back to the hell you came from, devil. Back to the hell you came from, Lucifer. And the only person you need to listen to in your life is Jesus Christ. And if you want to support your Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, make sure you send $1 to the address down below. Praise God. Amen. Hallelujah. These people are taken seriously, right? Like, these people are taken seriously. The whole shtick that I just did for you right there, right? That wasn't even a parody. Like, that was a point for point. Like, that was how it is. I can show you that shit. That's who these guys are, and they're taken seriously. So what do you expect? Like, what do you expect from a society that actually looks at what I just did there and thinks, that's a serious thing. I gotta give $1 to that guy. Right? Like, how do you think these guys are making their money? Like, fucking Joel Osteen exists. Joel Osteen is a real person that exists in the world. And, like, I know that when I'm scrolling TikTok, there's always people who are popping up on my feed who are essentially fascist fundamentalist Christians, who are saying things like Christianity is the only one true way, right? Well, what do you think that means? If you're saying Christianity is the one true way, that means that you can just destroy anyone else you like. That's what it is. You can just those are heretics. You can murder them. That's totally fine, and that's exactly what we're doing. Like, we're a very stupid, dim-witted people. We're a very stupid, dim-witted people. And if you believe in your heart of hearts that the magic book, right? I got my Bible right here. If you believe in your heart of hearts that this is a magic book that was written by the hand of God himself to be worshipped by decree, if you believe that, then there's nothing you won't believe. Then you are susceptible to any kind of gullible bullshit. You can be convinced of anything if you believe that. And people are convinced of anything. Like, imagine actually believing that a group of people who live across the world are heretics just because they have a different book. Like, obviously they have a different book. Like, these forces didn't actually connect with one another in serious ways until way later. Yeah. We got Florida representatives. Good to see you, Cal. Good to see you, Pittsburgh, dude. I love that you guys say hallelujah when I start doing that stuff. That makes me feel good about myself. By the way, I am dead certain. I am dead certain that if I were to try to turn this into a cult, that I would do a lot better. I think I would be a lot more successful if I was here wearing robes with a dumb little hat, being like, today, children, we are here to discuss the Holy Book of Jehovah. Let us turn into our Bibles, Ecclesiastes 43, verse 12. I'm absolutely dead certain that I would be making hand over fist. I think that I would be a very wealthy person. If I just was talking about how, and then Jesus came and across the land, and he said to the children of the gospel of the Jehovah, I think people would really dig it. I think I would be like a multimillionaire, and it wouldn't take long, right? That's how fucking stupid we are. I just have self-respect. I can't be a fraud, right? I just can't be a fraud. So, but I love it when you guys say hallelujah. That makes it really funny. Yeah, we got Florida representatives, this is from Cotton, trying to pass a law forbidding young girls from discussing their periods. Why are the feds tolerating this? Civil war never ended. I mean, for God's sakes, they're already passing dress codes. Like, they're passing a dress code, for God's sakes. Men can't wear dresses. Like, so, get fucked. Get fucked the entire reason. Like, we're the freest country in the world. We got freedom, for sure. I better wear pants, though. Yeah, if you don't wear pants. Thanks, Rusty. Make sure you like it, guys. Thank you. Cal, the Bible isn't even that. The New Testament is just people's accounts of Jesus' life. It isn't so holy. I mean, like, what's crazy to me about the way that we discuss the Bible here in the West is that, like, I actually like the Bible. I think the Bible is actually a good book for people to actually read and know something about. But what's happened is that it's been co-opted by total frauds. People who are literally trying to convince you, yeah, reconnection is successful. Just a little blip. Just a little blip. We're back. Back in black. Have it down. And because these total losers have co-opted the Bible, now nobody actually reads it. Right? Nobody actually reads this book anymore. And nobody reads it from the perspective of, well, here's a story, or here's a narrative, if you prefer, that came out of a specific region during a specific time. And if you know something about the region, i.e. the Roman Empire, and you read this book, you can realize pretty quickly how profound and powerful it actually is. That the story of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ is actually a very powerful and profound story. But it would be like in 200 years if people were walking around talking about Harry Potter. Being like, and then Harry Potter waved his magic wand and smote the Dark Lord Voldemort. And people being like, yeah, but that's just a story. No, Harry Potter is real. There's actually really a secret society. There's a secret society of wizards that look over us. And if something's gone wrong in your life, you must have done something to upset the secret society of wizards. Yes, that's the secret society of wizards lurk behind every passageway and door. They see you when you're sleeping. They know when you're awake. They know when you've been bad or good. So be good, for goodness sakes. In the name of Dumbledore. Like, it would be the same dumb shit. Like, and it's just as stupid as that. And so instead of actually reading this book and being like, oh, wow, like, here's a people who were mounting a struggle against a serious evil empire. Like, the Roman Empire was outright crucifying people in public. The shit that the Roman Empire was doing, like, we complain about how our society is, has absolutely nothing on what the Roman Empire was doing. Like, we might get there. We might be publicly flogging people and publicly torturing people. Like, we might get there. But right now, we got nothing on the fucking Roman Empire, man. The Romans were an explicit slave society, where if you were a slave, you were just in a class of people, and people were just like, you're owned. Like, go do that thing. Shut your mouth. No one cares what you think. That if you wanted to, and if you wanted to just sell your slave, you could just do that, right? You could just, like, own a woman to have sex with. Like, this is the degeneracy that existed within the Roman Empire. You could walk to a market, find a woman, pay, and then you just own that woman, and you get to have sex with her. And no one is going to tell you that's wrong. You literally just get, like, you get to just rape a woman every day. And that's just totally normal and fine, living in the Roman Empire. Like, it's we're talking about a dark, bleak, degenerate shithole society that makes modern day fascists look like fucking leftists. And the Bible is the book that the people produced. That the Bible is the book that comes out of this terrifying, evil death society. And there's a reason why the early Christians were fought against. There's a reason why Christians were persecuted. And it's because the rulers of the society understood very clearly that if the people of the society actually began to operate on the principles that are espoused by these books and by these people, then we're finished. That the empire only works because of exploitation. It only works if you believe that it is completely fine to destroy other people, steal literal people, and enslave them. And that's considered civilized. Like, that's considered the civilized way of operating. Like, there's a lot to learn from the Bible, and people should read it. But we've ceded that territory to literally these boobs. Just these guys that are straight up trying to convince you that, like, magic is real. That I read Harry Potter and there are wizards hiding behind every corner, right? And there are young people on TikTok today that are defending the Bible from that position. There's one guy that I keep seeing pop up on my feed. I literally had to say, stop showing me this guy, because I just am not interested in seeing this guy anymore. Who outright will say, if you say, like, hey, magic's not real, right? He'll say, well, it's possible that these things happened. It's like, yeah, but it's not fucking likely, is it? Right? It's possible that anything can happen, but it's not particularly likely. And if you can come up with a counter narrative, one that actually makes sense, as opposed to magic is real, then you should probably go with that instead of magic is real, right? But the core reason that these guys are doing this is so that they can justify their bigotry, so that they can put a veneer on top of their bigotry that makes them sound civilized, so that they can continue hating Muslims and hating brown people and hating black people, right? That's what it's all about. Yeah, lean ground beef, right? The worship of money, right? You like money and you want to accrue of it as much of it as possible. Yeah, it's the worship of money. It's one of the pillars of the decline of Western civilization. That everybody is in this game of getting as much money as they possibly can as fast as possible. Forget about the consequences. Forget about, clean air, arable land, food that's not gross and makes you fat and sick. Forget about living in a society where assets are stable. Forget about strong infrastructure. You just want money. Right? And you want money so that you can buy little doodads and garbage for yourself to fill the void that exists inside of yourself, because you're living in a society that convinces you that stuff is the thing that'll do that. Forget about self-investigation. Forget about learning anything about yourself in a serious kind of a way. Forget about humbling yourself and realizing that you're part of a collective and a greater whole. Right? You need to worship money, worship yourself, and fundamentally worship stupidity in order to maintain it all. Right? That's what it's all about. And that's essentially what you're just saying. And I understand, like, we all need money in order to pay rent. We all need money to have food. You're more comfortable in this society if you have food and shelter. Right? You're more comfortable in this society if you have a certain degree of money. But what we're doing is we're ceding that. We're basically saying that, yeah, it's completely fine that somebody has $1 trillion and owns islands full of little girls they rape. Right? That's basically what we're saying when we start worshiping money on this kind of a level. And when you actually investigate what money is, you realize very quickly that it's just a false god that we've created. We literally just wrote numbers on a piece of paper and said, this is what we must worship. We must burn down our forests, tear up our land, poison our water, pollute our air, enslave our neighbors so that we get paper that we wrote numbers on. It's literally what we're doing. Like, literally what we're doing. And it's incredibly stupid. We should probably stop. And it's not going to fill the void that exists inside of your heart. It's not going to make you feel better. Right? You're going to go get your Bugatti, right? You're going to fuck your bitches, right? You're going to do all the things that Andrew Tate or whoever it is you jerk off to tells you to do, right? And it's not actually going to fill the void in your heart, right? That you're going to feel empty, and you're going to feel unfull, and you're going to feel like none of it was worth it. And you'll hit the midlife crisis, and you'll genuinely start asking yourself, what the fuck did I do any of that for? Because the truth of the matter is that you're part of a much larger system. You're a randomly generated being. You're a randomly generated being that just exists in the world. You didn't ask to be here. You're here without your consent. You can try to get mad at the universe for that, but good luck with that fight. And you're part of collective systems, including institutions that were here before you were born. And and if you don't humble yourself before that, if you don't humble yourself before that and acknowledge that you need to find value in yourself within that actual system, then you're just going to be empty. I don't think you can predict the future for me or anyone else has money. They seem awfully happy to me. No, it's absolutely false. Anytime we actually ask the wealthy how they feel about what's going on, they're all miserable. Right? We've asked them. You can find articles on this, right? We have articles from psychologists. We have articles from people who have an overwhelming wealth. They're miserable. And you know why they're miserable? Because they thought they could fill their heart with money, and it didn't work. And they feel really responsible for what's going on, but they don't know what to do about it. Because they don't understand that the problem is that they're hoarding money and wealth and resources from other people. And instead of distributing it into the society, instead of letting go of their worship of money, they're going to double down on it. And they're just going to die that way. And poor people of course poor people are miserable, right? They're dealing with a grinding poverty that could be easily alleviated. Alleviated. If that were true, why don't they give all their money away? Good question, right? Why don't they trade places with a poor person, right? They don't tend to do that because it's fundamentalism. It's a worship. It's a worship of money that they have fooled themselves into believing that sure they're miserable, but it can't be the money that's the source of that. It can't be the worship of the money that is responsible for that. And so they're looking for it in all the wrong places. And of course, the people they talk to are never going to tell them to give their money away because the people they talk to get paid by them, right? So if they give their money away, well, then they're not going to have the money to be able to pay the people who they're trying to get advice from. So it's a deadly cycle, and it's all built into the worship of money. We're a society of rich people don't give their money away because it's better to be miserable with money than miserable without, and that's the truth. I have to tell you, dude, I don't think we are talking the same language right now. Like, Colin Feely, opinions on MLM? Oh, Maoism? You're talking about Maoism? I'm not really an ism kind of a guy, dude. I don't really, I see historical figures, and I see people who existed and persisted throughout. Mao existed in his moment and had his moment and was the man for that moment. And said a lot of things that I agree with and said some things that I don't agree with. But my opinion of Mao matters less than the figure of Mao. That I tend to view Mao and Deng and all these guys as somebody for me to learn from. That I am a student of them. That I'm not here to criticize them. That, obviously Mao is a deeply important figure. The leader of the revolution, the leader of the Cultural Revolution, that he comes into conflict with the Dengists because Mao's vision of how to move forward was to remain somewhat insular and isolated, continue building productive forces within the borders of China, whereas Deng was about building productive forces internationally and allowing foreign money to come in, and Deng won. It's as simple as that. And that's more or less where I come down to. If people get after me because they're trying to fight with one another, I always kind of come down to just well, who won, right? The people obviously decided. It's not like Deng and that crew did some kind of trick. They were just more persuasive, and they persuaded more people to go along with their idea. Yeah, after about 300,000 household income, happiness doesn't increase. Yeah. Thoughts on universal basic income? The universal basic income will be the final desperate act of the capitalists in order to try to shore up their failing system. That I used to be a very big proponent of a universal basic income, and should they pass a basic income, I will actually support it, because I think that anything that helps the average man is good. but it's not going to stop the decline. It's not going to stop the decay. That fundamentally what we need to do is transfer the means of production into the hands of the working class. That's what matters. We need to eliminate CEOs. We need to eliminate the shareholder class. We need to eliminate the capitalist class. The people like Bill Gates just need to stop existing in the society. People like Kevin O'Leary just need to cease existing in the society. That I think and ultimately, and we're seeing this with this inflationary period right now. If you implement a universal basic income of, let's say, $1,000, then suddenly rent goes up $1,000, right? Like, that's what they're going to do. So unless you finally get to the point where you recognize that the problem is that there's an ownership class that needs to be eliminated, until you get to that point, you're always going to be victimized by them. And it doesn't matter what you do. Doesn't matter what you do. Yeah, Xi Jinping is doing a lot of good things. He's trying to crack down on billionaires and corruption. He's also militarizing the Chinese society. That's something that is deeply unfortunate. I wish that we weren't seeing that happen, right? Oh, here's the article I was looking at before. Right, Goldman Sachs cuts U.S. GDP growth forecast down to 1.2% for 2023 and increases China's to 6%. So even Goldman Sachs is saying that America is in a steady decline, and that China is ascending, right? Colin, I mostly mean, do you think protracted People's War is possible or applicable for Canada beyond that mass line cultural revolution? Oh yeah, okay. I don't. So this is kind of like asking, do you think there could be a communist revolution in the imperial core, right? Do you think that there could be a communist revolution in Canada or the United States? And my answer to this is no. I think that if you were able to gain enough force to have a protracted people's war that could actually seize power by force, like walk into the parliament building and start passing laws, that act by itself would divide the nation and balkanize the country. Balkanization just means a federated body breaks apart. So when the UK broke off from the EU, that was a sign of the balkanization of the EU. And I am more or less of the opinion that we are going to, the West generally is going to have to go through a period of balkanization first. That sections of America and sections of what was previously known as Canada will fall into fascism, just outright fascist regimes, and sections will move towards socialism, democratic socialism, and certain sections. I can see this in Seattle, for example, that a true Maoist style revolution could happen in Seattle, and I think be successful. And it sort of depends on how things break apart. That like Los Angeles could have something of a Marxist revolution, right? But perhaps not the entire state of California. And yeah, remember the Occupy movement. Yeah, it's been pretty washed out of the consciousness of the people. Gen Z does not know about the Occupy movement. That's something that I've learned. That Gen Z seems pretty illiterate, and that's on purpose, right? And that's on purpose. Yeah, Lean, you're only saying that because you're not the victim, right? That's all. Like, if you were the victim, you would be talking a different game. UBI will help people. It's only to provide comfort so people stay in line. Yeah. And UBI is a landlord bailout. Yeah, I've heard that line too, and there's something to that, right? That, like, why are we even bothering with this UBI thing? Why not just give people homes? Why not just let people own their homes and they have their homes? And forget about the UBI. Like, how about we take houses and just give them to people without houses, right? People won't be doing. Well, I forgot about the bingo again, guys. Sorry, I got to remember about it. I just keep forgetting. I want to do it. I want to do it, but seize the means of production, baby. Like, all a UBI is like a stopgap, right? If you took all of the wealth, if you took all of the money rather that exists in the society and handed it out to the poorest people, if you handed it out to everybody, if you tried to equalize the money supply, Well, in 1 year, we would be back where we started, because what matters is the structure of the society and who owns what, right? That people would take the money and they would give it to landlords, they would give it to corporate owners, right, to get goods and services, and maybe you have like a spike up of consumption for a moment, but then all that money ends up back in the Swiss bank accounts, right? They end up back offshore, right? And you constantly need to be in this state of redistribution. And so it's a structural failure. It's a structural problem. That UBI won't cover your rent. You'll lose your job due to automation. Liberal response, maid is waiting for you, hon. Just close your eyes and dance at the gay disco. Yeah, conservatives, just go die. And meanwhile, we're supposed to actually like take seriously when they say like we should. Why is there a population decline? Why aren't you having kids? Like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? The only people that don't want to exist in a capitalist society are those that are poor and have no will to ever change that reality. I mean, this is a very fascist position, right? That poor people are poor and it's their own fault. That there's no such thing, and again, this is the worship of the individual, right? That it's up to the individual to change their lot. There's no such thing as institutional factors. There's no such thing as universal factors. There's no such thing as historical factors. There's no such thing as reality, right? None of these things matter to the individualist or the fascist, right? That it's up to the poor person to get out of the hole. And yeah, bootstrap yourself. Just bootstrap yourself. Simple as that. So if you have that mindset, you can never actually have a serious adult conversation about what's going on in the society. You can never actually say, wait, what structures and institutions actually exist? Because the poverty that persists throughout America is structural. That we could alleviate it, we could eliminate it. That people are not poor because of their own personal failing and they don't have any will, right? People are poor because capitalism is structured so that there must be poor people. And in fact, the entire structure of capitalism exists in order to constantly degrade the quality of life of its citizenry, because that's how you degrade wages. That they want to push wages forever and perpetually further and further down. Like, what the capitalist fundamentally wants is free labor. He wants people to work for nothing. That's why we're in this real period of time now where people are saying no one wants to work anymore, because no one's actually willing to raise their wages. Nobody's actually willing to say, oh, well, the cost of living is up here, so the wages have to be up here, right? And so they just keep trying to charge the same rate that they charged in like 1974, and it's not working. And Gen Z and millennials are no longer willing to participate in this fraudulent game, right? Gen Z just stays home, and the millennials are like, yes, sweetie, please stay home. Right? That we're not sending forward into the next generation this narrative of you just got to bootstrap yourself, you just got to work harder. Like, no, like we know what's happened, we see what's happened, and if I had a kid and my kid was like, Dad, I need to stay home, I like rent's so high and I can't find a job, and I'd be like, absolutely, son, absolutely. And I wouldn't bullshit him, I wouldn't gaslight him the way that the boomers gaslight us, right? I wouldn't even try. That this narrative that says poor people are poor and it's their own fault is a hyper delusion that is one of the major pillars of the decline of Western civilization, which is the worship of the individual. And if you're going to worship the individual to that level and not actually engage with what is really happening, with the fact that the capitalists benefit from poverty, the fact that the capitalists, like literally the Federal Reserve, a major American institution, literally the Federal Reserve, said last year that they were going to increase unemployment. They were going to double it, right? Yeah, I know you think that being poor is a choice, dude, because you're worshiping the individual just like you're worshiping money. But you have major institutions. Like, listen to what is being said to you right now. You have the Federal Reserve, a major American financial institution, saying that its goal, and you also have the Bank of Canada saying that its goal is to raise interest rates, the result of which is to increase unemployment. So this idea that there are just no factors. And ultimately, I do have to say, so what? Like, so what if someone makes poor financial decisions? So what? We should still not have a society that allows people to fall into poverty and desperation. The complaint is that it's possible at all. Why is it possible for someone to become homeless? Why is that even an option? Like, why are you okay with the idea that someone should become homeless? Miranda. I miss you too, Miranda. We should hang out soon. Come down to the beaches. Let's have a walk around. Hit me up with a text or something. We should connect. What do I make of the upcoming housing crash as predicted by Desjardins Bank? I mean, the whole thing's crashing, Miranda. Like, the whole thing. I would be, first of all, be very skeptical of what the banking system is saying. That I think that what they are doing is they are prepping the society for a quote-unquote crash so that when the value of housing dips 15%, right? Like, housing has gone up like 200%. Housing has gone up like 200%, right? So they're saying, oh man, there's a big crash. So even if it dropped to like 30%, even if it dropped 50%, and they would all scream like, oh my God, that's a major crash. Holy cow, what a huge, massive crash. I can't even believe it. Well, it's still 150% over, right? So I think that they're just priming the society to normalize where housing prices are. And that housing prices are now it's just normal that they're this high. And when they dip down just a little bit, right? When they dip down just a little bit, we're all just supposed to accept, like, oh man, we're so lucky that we only have to pay 150% more, right? Like, we should get rid of this housing market entirely, right? Lean, I never said it was okay with someone being homeless, but okay. But that's the outcome, Lean. Like, that's the outcome, whether you want to admit it or not, right? The outcome of what you are saying is that people are homeless. And if all you're going to do is say, well, they made bad decisions, right? And never acknowledge that there are major institutional forces. If someone spends all their money on drugs and booze and is homeless, and someone doesn't and isn't homeless, where's the line for helping them and not? Well, if somebody is spending all their money on drugs and booze so that they end up homeless, chances are good they've been traumatized, right? No, that's what we're here for, that guy. That's what we're here for. That's what this is. Right? Like, this is what we're doing. If that means they've been traumatized, right? If someone spends all their money on drugs and booze, like, remove the moral implication from it from your thinking. Just eliminate it, right? What they are doing is they are taking their money and instead of paying for rent, paying to stabilize their life, paying to move forward in a way that is rational, they are going down a path of total self-destruction on drugs and booze. Sounds to me like they're experiencing a mental trauma. Sounds to me like they need a mental health clinic. Sounds to me like there's something very serious going on with that person that needs to very seriously be dealt with. And if a society refuses to actually acknowledge its responsibility to those who are in trauma or struggling, then that's a society that will turn against itself. That if we refuse to help the most vulnerable people in our society, then there is no one we are going to help. And if we choose to take our most vulnerable and throw them into the streets, then there's no one we won't do that to. High interest rate plus low house values. It is going to be a shit show. Well, Miranda, I mean, you saw very recently there was the collapse of these banks as well, right? You have the Silicon Valley Bank bailout, the Signature Bank bailout. Like, it's all going to come down at once. It's all going to come out with once. They have access to doctors. They get free access to medicine. No, they don't. What are you talking about? Mental health clinics aren't free. What are you talking about? Like, straight up, dude, what are you talking about? Spend $300 billion on 15 useless warships to confront China instead of help the homeless. Yeah, what the fuck is wrong with people like this? Yeah. Yeah. Like, what is wrong with us? Yep. First thing Doug Ford did is to cut off $400 million in mental health aid. Like, what the fuck are you even talking about, dude? Sure, we've got free healthcare if you break your arm, dude. Like, mental health is not covered. Just like how dentists, eye care are not covered, right? Like, if you have a psychotic break and you need mental health, you have limited options. There are limited options, sure, but this idea that we have a universal coverage, like, what are you even talking about, dude? Like, you're living in a dream world. Like, you're living in a dream world that doesn't actually exist. Yeah. Holy Compton, I'm right there with you, dude. That's why I love you in the chat, bud, every time. You're just like the little devil angel that pops up on my shoulder. Holy shit, just give the loser junkie a home. Stability therapy and a low-intensity job. Christ alive. Yep. Like, the problem is so easily solvable. Like, it's amazing how easy it is to say. But you realize that by doing that, you have to confront this housing market. You have to confront all of this ridiculous stuff. Really? So a mental ward in a hospital will charge you a bill if you were admitted? Yes. Like, what, you think therapy is covered, dude? Like, unless you're, like, actually dangerous, like, unless you're actually cutting people, right? Like, if you're a criminal, that we pay for. This is what's so funny, is that if you're a criminal and you actually do crimes and you go to jail, then we're all in agreement that we absolutely all need to pay for that. Right? Oh yeah, we can give that guy free room and board. That guy needs to be well taken care of. He can get food, he can get shelter, he can be safe. Right? We'll have people look in on him, absolutely, 100%. As long as he kills someone first. Right? Oh well, he's a dangerous criminal, right? The try to go get free therapy, dude. Just try. Just go try to do it. See what happens. Poutine. Good, strong Canadian name right there. Good opportunity to say please like, share, and subscribe to the stream, guys. Please hit the buttons, hit the bells, hit the whistles. That's free to do. If you want me to actually become more politically active in this society, if you want me to be doing this full time, if you want me to go down to City Hall and talk the way I talk to you, to the mayor of this city, if you want me to become politically active and do this full time, then you've got to donate to the Patreon, which is in the description. If you have even $1, it will help. I need 400 people to give me $5, and I can start doing this full time. And I would hope that you think that would be a more useful way to spend your money than buying a latte or something this month. Thanks, guys. Poutine, who gets to decide where we spend the Commonwealth in communism? We already have a hell of a challenge with 40% at the moment to keep people happy. Well, usually part of the misnomer of part of the myth of communism in the West is that it's a dictatorship, right? The way that communist societies are typically structured is through a series of, like the Soviet Union was a series of councils and guilds, right, that would elect representatives, and those representatives would go up the chain until finally you ended up with the Executive Council, which is where Stalin was, right? The Chinese, for example, elect people to a body called the National People's Congress, and the National People's Congress then elects the Executive Council, which Xi Jinping sits on. And that council itself is respondent to the National People's Council. And so communist systems are highly democratic. So when you say who gets to decide where we spend the Commonwealth in communism, it is the people. And the systems that come out of communist societies are very responsive to the needs and the demands of the populace. So when, which is why you end up with, in China right now, the Chinese have like a 94% approval rating of their government, whereas here we have like what, a 30%, maybe a 40% approval rating on good days. And there's a reason for that. It's because the communist systems respond to the people, And our systems don't. They just don't. So when you ask who's responsible for where we spend the Commonwealth and the communism, it's the people themselves. It's the people themselves, because the people are actually electing their representatives, and those representatives are beholden not to capital and not to their donors and not to lobbyists, right? They're respondent to the people who elect them. And if they stopped doing that, then they would actually not be elected any longer. It actually works the way we say it works here, the way that we pretend it works here. Right? That when I was growing up, I was always told this lie about democracy. This, yeah, we vote a guy in, and if they don't do what we want, then we get rid of them. Well, now the whole system is completely corrupted, that them getting voted out is part of the job. They know that they're going to get voted out at some point, and so their role is to do what their owners tell them to do, and then once they've done that and paid fealty, they get voted out, and then they go sit on a board or something and get paid a 6-figure salary to give a speech every so often, right? And the idea that so this idea, but the latest vote in China being unanimous, you believe it's legit, a full open-minded choice from the people? The latest vote in China being unanimous. I'm not 100% sure what it is you're talking about there, Poutine. So I'm not going to really comment on that. I'd like to see a source. I'd like to, what vote are you talking about? Who voted for what? Was it the people that voted? Are you talking about the National People's Congress that did a vote? Oftentimes when the council sits and discusses what it's going to do, when the council sits and discusses what it's going to do, yeah, of course they have unanimous votes, because oftentimes their votes are just bureaucratic passing. That they sit and they all say, how do we think everything's going? And they all go, okay, we're gonna vote that way. Oh, you're talking about the third term, when they elected Xi Jinping for the third term. Well, there's a really good reason why that's happening, dude. There's a really, really good reason why Xi Jinping is getting his third term, and it's happening unanimously. And it's because he's an extremely good leader that's doing extremely good things for the people of China. That the approval rating of people across China for Xi Jinping is skyrocketing high. That to stand up and say, I think Xi Jinping's doing a bad job right now in China, means that you lose your seat. Straight up. The people of China value evidence-based rational thinking. And if you're going to stand up and try to pretend like Xi Jinping is doing a bad job or is a bad leader of that country at this period of time, that's evidence enough for people to turn on you in China. For real, dude. I know that you're over there thinking to yourself, this sounds like bullshit. It's because you live in America. You can't perceive having a good leader that's actually trying to do good things. Xi Jinping's term is the term where 800 million people are lifted out of poverty. Sorry, dude. Sorry, dude. He's an extremely popular leader. Also, Xi Jinping happens to be the leader that is beginning to militarize against America. He's the leader that is in power during this period of time when America is starting to pound the war drum. And the people of China know that they don't want to go through a political shuffle at the highest levels of their government while they are gearing up to go to war against America. That they are happy with Xi Jinping at the helm. He's done a good job. The people of China are ecstatic about him. He's overwhelmingly popular. He's got his hand on the wheel. He looks like things are stable, and he's gearing up for war against America. And so they're going to let him keep doing that, right? And the only reason why all of this sounds like a dictatorship to you is because you're used to having a leadership full of boobs like Matt Gaetz. You're used to having leaders like Donald fucking Trump. You're used to having two parties that constantly come in and blow each other up and are constantly at odds with one another and exploding. And so the idea that you would actually have an organization that's actually interested in the future of the civilization that's ruling it is just a foreign concept to you, right? I'm not saying that to insult you. I see it all the time. People come in here all the time and they refuse to believe that a society can actually be led by people who are interested in helping the people and the society. And that's because you've just gotten so used to living in America. You're just used to being betrayed. You're used to people like Major Tyler Green. You're used to these imperialists and these fascists and these frauds. You're used to people just completely destroying everything. That the concept of a plan, the concept that you would actually sit down and make a plan is foreign to us. Is completely foreign to us. Yeah, if a goddamn bridge needs to be built, you don't need the consensus of a handful of contrarian shitheads to stand in the way of what must be done, yeah? Yeah, and you should look at Xi Jinping's actual journey to get the positions he's in now. It's an incredible story. It's an incredible journey. Would I rather live in Canada or China? I really don't like this question because, first of all, like, I am a Canadian. I have no interest in betraying my countrymen. I have no interest in quote unquote or in moving to like, if you like communism so much, why don't you move to a communist country? I want to improve my own society. I want us to be able to come to our senses and find our feet on the ground and use evidence-based reasoning to come to logical conclusions about how we should act in the world. And I am desperate to beseech to my fellow Canadians that we should be improving our society instead of tearing it apart. And so I'm not really interested in moving to China, even though I think that China is a very beautiful country. That I think what China is doing, if it was happening in my country, I would never shut up about it. If Justin Trudeau was doing the shit that the Chinese were doing, I would be ringing the bells and I would be saying, everybody vote Liberal, let's go, let's go, let's go. But that's not happening, right? So I'm not interested in abandoning my countrymen in their time of need. I'm interested in trying to create a persuasive argument of how we should move forward to be more successful in the world and to stop destroying ourselves and the future of our children. Transylvanian says, it's hard for Westerners to understand because they've never experienced having a government that actually does its job well and has improved conditions for the people to such a great degree. Yeah, we just don't want to believe that it exists. Like, we can't seem to believe, because if we believe that it exists, then we really do have to acknowledge that we're falling behind, that we're not the greatest country in the world, that we don't have a manifest destiny, that Jesus Christ is not coming back. Like, all of this shit is just made up bullshit. And we actually will have to begin having a more serious conversation, right? A more serious conversation about what it is we are doing here. And we're not ready for it. We're genuinely not ready to have a serious soul-searching journey as a people. That we're still caught up in the worship of money and the worship of the self and the worship of stupidity. We're still caught up in that trifecta. That we're not actually interested in saying, wait, why are we here? What is this place? Why was I born? What is it to be born? What is it to be here and exist? Certainly not to collect little pieces of fucking paper. Like, and it's not until people get into their 80s and start to face death in the face, start to look death in the face, that they even begin to ask these questions. Well, we should begin by asking these questions. These are the questions that we should be asking in our school system. We should be asking people to their faces with all seriousness, what is it that you're here to do you think? What is it that you think you're here to accomplish? Why do you think this exists? What is the purpose of existence? Why should we exist in the first place? And the idea that we are structuring a society to do anything other than feed, shelter, and secure every single person that's randomly generated into the society tells you that we're just degenerate. We're just not interested in it. We're interested in worshiping money, worshiping ourselves, and being very stupid while doing it. Xi Jinping isn't just some oligarch who took up the seat of power. Yeah, he's worked his way up the system through the city councils up to bigger things. Exactly. Yeah, that the national. What I love about the National People's Congress, Xi has the mandate of heaven. Yep. What I love about the National People's Congress is that it's not like electing people in America. That in America, if you win a beauty contest, Right? If you win one election, you get to write the law of the land. So like DeSantis gets to just win one election and then start writing laws, right? Well, in China, if you win your election, that just means you go to the National People's Congress. But the National People's Congress isn't just going to let you write laws for that area. They say, okay, welcome. You've convinced a group of people that you get to actually be here. So now we're going to see if you're competent. Now we're going to see if you're actually here to just make money for yourself. Now we're going to see if you're actually capable of governing. And we're going to start by sending you to a village of 100 people. And we're going to leave you there for a little while. Then we're going to talk to the villagers, and we're going to talk to you, and we're going to see how that went. And then you can ascend, right? And then they give you larger and larger groups with bigger and bigger challenges through time, right? That it's more like an educational system than what we would consider as a government system. And eventually you ascend and you create a faction, right? That's the factionalization exists within the structure for sure. Xi Jinping is a faction without a doubt, and that's how you ascend. And it takes years and decades and decades and decades of constant appraisal and constant and while simultaneously needing to continuously win elections. Like it's not an easy thing to do. They don't just give you the keys to the palace because you won an election. Like and so it creates a more stable system. I will admit, should the National People's Congress become corrupted, it's gonna turn hard. It'll turn hard. Like it's not gonna do this thing we're doing where we're sort of flirting with fascism. Like it's gonna turn hard and become a fascist organization right away, should it become corrupted. But the Chinese are doing everything they can to ensure that that doesn't happen, and seem to be very successful by it. You even have documents coming out of the CIA saying that they're frustrated because they can't learn anything from Xi's inner circle. They can't get anybody on the inside, right? So it's like a tightly controlled kind of a thing. Ligon Disease says, John, it's like that scene from the Simpsons movie when Bart and Ned Flanders go fishing. Bart was anticipating being choked when he messes up, but instead he gets a pat on the back. Yeah. Do I believe in social capitalism? No. I'll go into that more. I must imagine he's doing well. Just that shock of ideas is by nature natural. And challenge how we can improve is also natural. Surprised everyone can agree. I mean, there's just no point being contrarian. That when people stand up and offer ideas, like the Chinese operate on a 5-year plan system. They have a 100-year plan, and they break it into 5-year plans, right? And so you don't end up with anybody standing up going, this is all stupid and we should get rid of this. This is dumb. The communists are acting so dumb and it's a failure for everybody. You got none of that. That what you get is you get somebody who stands up and says, so this thing that happened during the 5-year plan, I feel like it could have been better if we had instead of done this. And then the council will look at that and be like, that's an interesting point. Perhaps why don't we take a region of China and try that idea out and then readdress it over the next 5 years? So that's what you end up with. You end up with everybody trying to, like, success in the Chinese system doesn't mean destroying someone else. That's not how that works. It means adding something in to the system that's already going. That there's a passing of the baton that is constantly happening. This is something that is not understood in the West at all. So I'll give you the cleanest example. When Deng came to power and opened up the markets to capital, like 40% of the Chinese economy is capitalist, right? When he opened up the markets to foreign capital, the opinion of the Marxists and the capitalists across the world was, that's it, Chinese communism is over. It's done, it's finished, done, finito. Deng came in, the Maoist period is over, communism is dead, Deng is not a Marxist, it's over. And the capitalists have been operating that way ever since. But if you actually look at what Deng was saying, and if you look at how Deng was talking, he was talking with an understanding that, yes, we're going to let the capitalists come in, and that's going to introduce instability, and that's going to introduce inequality, no doubt, Like, no doubt that's going to happen. But as we move forward, we're going to be able to level that out. That we're going to let some people get rich first, and we're going to be able to level that out. And that'll create a richer, more stable society. And as capitalist enterprises collapse, because that's what capitalist enterprises do, we'll begin nationalizing them and putting them into the hands of the people. And if you heard that in the West, you would think to yourself, well, the next guy's not going to do that. There's no way that that's going to withstand. But that's exactly what happened. That the Dangists took the baton, handed it to the Xi Jinpingists, the Pingites. I don't know what to call these guys. The Xiists, the Xiists. They took the baton and handed it to Xi Jinping, and Xi Jinping took the baton and said, I will honor your legacy. And what has he been doing? He's been leveling out the wealth. As capitalist enterprises have been collapsing, he's been nationalizing it. So the baton passed from Mao to Deng. The pass from Mao to Deng was rough because there was tension there, because Mao didn't agree with what Deng had in mind, but the people did, so they went along with it. Deng didn't destroy Mao's legacy, but instead built upon his legacy, then passed the baton over to Xi Jinping, who now has the baton and is doing things with the idea that he's going to pass that baton down the line, and the legacy of Mao to Deng to Ping will continue to the next generation. That concept that I just described is utterly foreign in the West. We do not think about ourselves that way at all. That we are lucky if we can remember something that happened a month ago. That literally entire wars fall out of the discourse because a celebrity slaps another celebrity in public. Like, we are not, we have ADHD, we are very dumb, and our system is structured to destroy itself over and over again. That if the Democrats come in, like Jimmy Carter comes in and puts solar panels on the White House, Reagan comes in and takes them off. That's the way America works. And so when we are confronted with the idea that, these guys are all working in tandem together towards a universal goal, we simply cannot believe that that is the case. China is a 4,000-year-old civilization. They are smarter than us. They know more about what they're doing, and they are highly motivated. That they know exactly what the West is willing to do to them. They experienced a period of 100 years of humiliation. They were the poor man of China, the kicking dog of the British, American, French, and Japanese empires, shitting on them, getting them hooked on drugs, putting them into regressive poverty that was supposed to be perpetual and forever. And then Mao stood up and said, fuck that shit, chased them all out. Deng said, I'm going to take all your wealth. And Xi Jinping said, I'm going to make sure no one gets left behind. And that's exactly what's happened. And they're highly motivated for that because they know exactly what's coming for them if they don't. And we're too stupid to know that that's the case. Our civilization is 150 years old. We're babies. And we're walking around thinking we've got something to teach the Chinese. Get the fuck out of here. I think capitalism has pitfalls, but I think it's better than communism as a whole. You think that because you're the beneficiary. Go ask the South Americans or the Middle Easterners or the Africans what they think about capitalism. Right? If your perspective of capitalism is just, I got all the wealth that we stole from the rest of the world, right? Go ask the Incas or the Mayans or the Cree or the Muskokas or the Aztecs what they think about capitalism. Go ask the black Africans what they think about capitalism, right? Like, you're just sitting there as a person of privilege who has been the primary beneficiary of a system of death and destruction, saying, yeah, this system is great because I'm rich. Well, the rest of the world tends to disagree, and we will be isolated for it. And once we have nowhere to go to get our spoils from, we'll begin tearing ourselves apart, which is exactly what we've done, by the way. Because the rest of the world has built up military force enough to defend itself. That we can't just wander into their lands and enslave their people anymore. That they've built military forces that are strong enough to turn it into a grind for us. So it's no longer profitable to invade places like Venezuela. It's no longer profitable for us to invade places like Cuba. It's no longer profitable for us to invade Laos, Cambodia. It's certainly not profitable for us to invade China, right? That they've built their productive forces enough and they've built their military forces enough that if we go in there, we lose money in the end. So we're not going to do it. But capitalism demands exploitation. It demands expansion. And if we can't exploit Latin America like we always did, if we can't exploit Africa like we always did, if we can't exploit the Middle East like we always did, if we can't exploit India, if we can't exploit Indonesia, if we can't exploit China, if we can't exploit these places, well then what are we going to do? We're going to exploit ourselves. We're going to begin exploiting the people of our own nations. And people like you who are sitting there going, well, I'm rich, so I'm fine, are going to look around your society and you're going to see people falling into homelessness, falling into drug addiction, falling into poverty, being exploited by fucking losers, by Jeffrey Epstein worshipping psychopaths. Because that's what capitalism always is. That's what it's always been. And eventually it's going to happen right in front of your eyes. Cal, while China has made massive developments recently, you have to realize it's still a developing nation. The most comfortable life you can live is one born in the imperial core. Yeah, we're just sitting on the spoils, that's all. But the concern, of course, is that we're on the decline, just as I described, right? We've run out of places to exploit, and the rest of the world has built up its capacity enough that it can defend itself, right? It can defend itself from America. The best that America can do now is just try to destroy places in order to prevent them from developing. That it's not about even getting resources for itself, it's about preventing other powers from being able to rise up and develop. And it's backfired completely. America cannot confront China militarily. It literally cannot do it. Woe be to the world if it tries. And unless you're a lunatic, you have to realize that that's the truth. There's no one wins a war if America and China go to war with one another. No one wins that conflict, right? No one wins that conflict. And so the war is actually economic and diplomatic. And the Chinese know how to do it, and the Americans have no idea what they're doing. And so we are facing a sharp decline. And it's going to be a sharp decline. Once the dollar devalues, we'll see who the developing nation is. That right at this exact moment, America is coasting on the post-World War II, post-Cold War era. It's coming to an end, and America has no plan. Because it doesn't plan. Let chaos reign. Compton. Y'all are fucking terrified. You're all fucking terrified of democracies actually working. Yet we need therapy. This skittish liberalism and skepticism of democracy is a fucking diseased thinking. Yeah. In my opinion, what's the best country on the earth at the moment? That's a tough question, dude. That is a tough question. It depends on what you're looking for. If all you want is just material wealth, and it also depends on what position you're in, right? Would you rather live in a country where everybody was kind of poor, but everybody was on that same kind of level, and everybody was in the same category, and everybody understood that, yeah, we would be wealthier, but we've got kind of external forces that are keeping us from doing this, but at least we're all kind of together, and we're doing the best with what we can. Well, I'm describing Cuba, right? And you're living in a place where, yeah, we've got problems, but we're trying to solve them to the best that we can. That wouldn't be a bad life. There's nothing wrong with that. Would you like to live in a society that is full of problems, but you know for a fact, 100%, that the people who are in the position to solve those problems are actually trying to solve them? That some days you literally walk into an area, that you weren't that you haven't been in about a year, and there are just entire buildings that are there now, that there are entire institutions and entire structures that are just coming up around you, that like in the space of 15 years China has built like 200,000 kilometers of high-speed rail, right? Like, I would rather live in a country that was confronting its problems and trying to solve them and failing than ignoring them the way that they do. But every country has its ups and its downs, right? And I tend to think of these things like, I don't think of these things in a snapshot kind of a way. I tend to see things, or try to, as a long scale history. And right now, the West, like, we are just going into, like, we're babies. Like Canada and the United States are babies. We're 150 years old. Like, we're 200 years old. Like, we barely exist. It makes sense that we would experience a collapse. It makes sense that we would have a balkanization. It makes sense that we would have some kind of tearing apart. Like, just the relationship between Quebec and the rest of Canada alone, right? Like, we back in the 90s, we had a referendum for whether or not they would separate. So who's the best? It depends on what you're measuring. What I can tell you is that I would rather live in a country that was trying to solve its problems than one that were pretending the problems didn't exist. I won't even argue and tell you I don't worship money. I'll admit I do. That's a good first step. And I'll try to get as much as I possibly can. And I don't actually care if you judge me. Yeah, I know, dude. To exist and persist in this society, you have to have the ethos of a sociopath. That's the bottom line. That if you want to succeed, if you want to do well, here's my advice to you, Lean, if you want to be a good capitalist. You want to be a good, successful capitalist? Take the guilt and the shame that exists inside of people who are not sociopaths, if you even have this, and get rid of it. Be gone with it. Betray everyone you can. Steal everything you can. Exploit everyone you can. If you end up hiring people, always steal their wages. Never don't steal wages. Always steal wages. There's no recourse. The worst thing that will happen to you is you'll have to pay more wages. You'll have to pay the wage that you were supposed to pay in the first place. You'll never go to jail. You'll never face punishment. And if you get yourself well positioned enough, you'll get bailed out anyway. So, first and foremost, if you want to be a good capitalist, you want to worship money, you want to worship yourself, and you want to be stupid while you're doing it, because that's the way to succeed as a capitalist, get rid of empathy. Do not care about other people. Step over homeless people. Spit on them, in fact. And constantly tell everybody how great you are. How competent and how smart and how intelligent you are. And do it with all the confidence that you have in your throat. That's how Kevin O'Leary goes. That's how Ben Shapiro goes. That's how Peterson goes. Right? Just confidently tell people how smart, how intelligent, how competent you are, when we all know in this moment, and it's good that you're admitting it, that you worship money, you worship yourself, and you worship stupidity. John, how bad would a U.S. collapse need to be for another country, China, to step in and help establish a new government? I am of the opinion that the rest of the world is going to just watch it happen. That it is going to be a policy of isolation. That the rest of the world is going to build up its own productive capacity and its own productive force, and is going to simply watch America deal with itself. And it will only intervene, places like China will only intervene if forces that come out of the collapse begin to threaten it, or threaten its interests. So if like a private militia, or like, let's say Bill Gates has a private militia, and he decides to send that private militia to, let's say, Nicaragua, right? China might get involved in that to try to prevent Bill Gates' private military from taking over anything in Nicaragua. because China's own interests are involved in Nicaragua and it doesn't want Bill Gates to get involved in Nicaragua. But it's not going to go into America proper, because that's just getting entangled in something it doesn't need to get entangled in. And if you ask me, it's just wise governance. Just don't get involved. Let America have a meltdown, right? Like if someone's having a meltdown and goes to their room and is having a meltdown and starts punching the walls and starts doing stuff, you're not really going to get involved in that, right? Like, you're not going to go in there and try to calm them down, right? They're having a meltdown and they need to have a meltdown, and that's what's going to happen. And the entire rest of the world is going to negotiate with itself. And probably, and honestly, I bet you that China and the rest of the world is going to sit there and be like, man, I hope America can come back out of this. Like, I bet you, I really do. I bet you that India and China and all these places are actually going to be rooting for America and just be like, man, I hope that they can calm down and rejoin the international community. I hope that we can watch that happen. So, but the meltdown's coming, man. Like, Harley Quinn, she's our icon. Poutine. So you don't believe in social capitalism? There's no such thing as social capitalism. That capitalism only permits good things to happen to the working class when we are surrounding the halls of power, when we are demanding revolution. Then capitalism will concede things. But capitalists will always regress those systems, right? Like, this is exactly the story of the New Deal, that the halls of power were surrounded by communists, socialists, and labor unionists demanding a revolution. The capitalists began giving concessions just so long as they got to keep the means of production. For a period of time, the populace benefited from those, but now they've all regressed since Reagan, right? What's called the neoliberal period. And the capitalism will always operate that way. It will always do that. There's no such thing as social capitalism. That if you think that social capitalism is happening, all you've done is you've put the demon in a box. Well, the demon will get out. And, I mean, if you're smart, you'll just destroy the demon. But we're yet to get there. Yeah, DPRK is cool, but Cuba's fucking fire. Any major differences from Russia to Chinese model we should analyze? I mean, the structure of the Soviet model was different and is different from the Chinese model. I think the major thing that we should be acknowledging about Russian history and about Russia is that most of what you're seeing happening in Russia and post Stalin and post the Soviet Union is because of the trauma the Russians experienced in World War II. That World War II, like 25 million Russians were murdered in World War II. That enormous infrastructure was destroyed. They reconfigured their entire economy and their entire society into a war economy in order to defend themselves from the Nazi threat. Like, this is a major trauma. A trauma that the Russian citizens will not get over for generations. For generations. They will still, the trauma of World War II will reverberate throughout Russian history. And if you don't understand that, if you don't really understand that about Russia, then you don't really know what's going on with Russia. That the reason why the Russians abandoned the communist project, in my perspective, is because they decided that it was better to try to ameliorate itself with the West that had just previously invaded it than it was to stand alone on these principles of communism. That the Nazis were defeated, but fascism won. That's the thing to understand. And that the period of the post-World War II period and the post-Soviet period is a nation and is the leadership of that nation doing everything it can to distance itself from the forces that inspired the invasion, i.e. the communists, and to attempt to reach across the aisle and shake the hand to join with the West, right? Like, that's Khrushchev, Brezhnev, Yeltsin, Gorbachev, Putin. All of these guys were constantly in this position of trying to get involved with what Europe was doing. That they wanted to be part of the EU. They wanted to be part of NATO. They wanted to be part of the G7. And at one point they did. They succeeded in that. And they became part of the G8 for a moment. And they didn't view themselves as wanting to get involved with China, that there was the Sino-Soviet split that had happened. And so, to me, this period of time is highly worth our analysis, bereft from the narrative of, oh, well, communism failed because that's what communism does, it just fails. Well, no. Communism didn't fail in Russia. It was abandoned. That World War II depleted the energy of the communists, and that the communists had put their heart and soul into defeating the Nazis. And after the period of Reconstruction, they were a depleted force, highly traumatized, and ready to put aside this conversation if it just meant never again will we be invaded. Never again will this happen to us. We want to be your friends. We don't want to antagonize you. And this is what I think should be analyzed when it comes to Russia. And the Chinese are different, of course, because China has no such trauma, right? That the trauma that the Chinese bear is the 100 years of humiliation. And the Chinese feel as though they are moving away from that they are through that, and they've built the productive forces, they've taken control of their country, and they're building forward, and they had the Cultural Revolution, and they're sacrificing themselves into these Dangus policies in order to build a beautiful country all together, and we will never again experience 100 years of humiliation. And if the Americans think they're going to come in here and fuck us up, then they are going to taste the flame of the dragon. They are going to blow themselves up against the Great Wall of China. Like, this is the way they talk. Like, China feels as though they are at the helm, that they have taken control of it, and they are moving forward, right? And whereas Russia, I think, is still wandering in the desert, is still trying to, like, Putin is an interesting figure right now because he came to power believing that he was going to integrate with the West. He believed that he was going to be part of the West. And his legacy will be that he turned away from that. Well, that he was forced to turn away from that. Because he came to recognize that the West will never accept us. That we will always be seen as a second-class nation. We will always be seen as a rival and as an enemy. And so now it's had to pivot back to China. But it's still not communist. It still has oligarchs. It still has all this kind of stuff. But it's a very liquid period of time in Russia right now. And only time will tell. Post-Putin is going to be very fascinating in China, in Russia. That post-Putin, once Putin goes away and a new leader comes in, it's going to be very, very interesting. The new leader of Russia is going to be it's going to be a very interesting time in Russia. I suspect it will initially be another oligarch, but the people of Russia by then will have become highly militarized, be highly militant, be very willing to make decisions for what they believe is the existential future of Russia. And I'd be very surprised if the people of Russia were willing to look at some oligarchic boob and say, yeah, you're a serious person. We take you seriously. So it'll be a very interesting period of time, what happens in Russia. As you can see, I've got a lot to say about Russia and China and the history of those countries, because I've the thing that's very shocking, the thing that's most shocking to me about our country is how we don't care about the history of other nations. Like, that's always surprising to me. Like, we should care. We should care about the history of other nations. We should listen to what their history is, and we should take seriously the traumas they've experienced and listen to how they speak. We just don't want to. We're just not interested in that. Good opportunity to say like, share, subscribe, guys. If you've got $1 jangling around in your pocket, you want me to do this full time? You want me to go to City Hall? You want me to start pissing off some of these oligarchs and some of these assholes? Donate $1. Even $1 helps. If you're only donating $1, maybe make it $2. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. And big shout out, big thank you to all my Patreons and to everybody who's already supporting me. I value you to a degree that you don't even understand. Thank you. Conton, what the fuck is social capitalism? This is Reddit brain bullshit, yeah. Social democracies in the first world still rely on exploitation of the third world. Yeah, America, if it was a social democracy, would still exploit third world labor. But I support social democracy. And it jumped down. It jumped down. I hate it when it does that. Zimps. That's funny, dude. Zimps. In Brazil now, that social democratic government doesn't rely on exploiting other nations. It focuses on building up its own economies to benefit its own citizens. Like, a country that wants to call itself a social capital, like you can't. You're either capitalist, you're either moving towards capitalism or you're moving towards communism. And that socialism is the path between those two, right? And you're either regressing towards capitalism or you're proceeding towards communism. And the idea that there is such a thing as like social capitalism just doesn't exist. That capitalism is the antithesis of socialism. And you can proceed forward and still have a capitalist model, but if you're not careful, the capitalist model will regress back into capitalism. It will do it. Like, we're seeing that in America right now. Yeah. Europe tried that social capitalism. Now it's all being slowly but surely dismantled, turned into neoliberalism. Those concessions were only given out of fear of communist revolution. Yeah, absolutely. They should follow the example of the DPRK, which has shown how a small country with limited resources can be what is this word? What have you done to me? Safeguard its independence, yeah. Well, Cuba has benefited a lot from the capitalism, richer... what? Sorry, Putin, I gotta check you on this. Cuba benefits a lot from the capitalist, richer classes? What are you talking about? There's an enormous sanction regime that exists. The only way that they can get any wealth into their country is through their tourism industry. That if you go to Cuba, they have factories that are literally just laying there, that are just not active because they have no markets to sell them to, because there are destroyers that'll just like stop their boats. It's a very serious situation for the people of Cuba. And the idea that Cuba is benefiting a lot from the capitalist richer classes, I mean, no. Like, no. They should decommoditize land and real estate, start growing their own food, fund their own projects, or borrow from countries like China. Hopefully the capitalists won't start a civil war. I mean, if you ask me, the major thing that Cuba needs is tools. That's really what it needs more than anything. That if they were able to get their sugar, their rum, and their other stuff, I'm blanking on it. If they could get their luxury goods to market in a more successful way, to a much larger degree, and get connected to a market and get tools, you would see a Cuba that would build itself up, and it would happen very fast. It would happen very, very fast. That the thing that's holding Cuba back, without a doubt, is the sanction regime and the boats off their border, off their coast rather. Would it work as well if we were not as much able to benefit from leisure money? Like, I don't understand the comment. China still has the ability to rein in its capitalists. Yeah, it always has too. That's the thing. And it's getting now that the capitalists are complaining about it. I'm seeing article after article after article that's complaint that of people just complaining about it, right? There's no good investments left in China because we can't exploit the Chinese citizens anymore, and they're just nationalizing stuff. That the Chinese are not interested in being destroyed by Western capitalists anymore, right? They're interested in building up their own productive forces, and they're interested in bracing for a war with America. They should provide free healthcare and education, price restrictions and regulations. Yeah, I agree with all of that. For infrastructure, they should invite China and become part of BRI. Yeah. I mean, I think Cuba is moving in that direction. Look, the issue with what's going on with Cuba is, like, I know we say it in a very flowery kind of way, oh, it's the sanctions and all this kind of stuff. America has parked a battleship off the coast of Cuba, and if Cuba tries to send a boat out, they stop the boat. And if the boat won't stop, they blow it up. Like, I don't know why this is so difficult to understand. Like, they can't get goods to the rest of the world. So you end up with a little tiny island that is just the resources of a little tiny island. And the people of that, like, they don't have Dremels and drills, and they don't have complex tools, because they don't have a factory that's capable of actually making that, and they don't have the resources they need to even build that factory in the first place if they wanted to, right? Nor do they have the technological knowledge, nor do they have the know-how, right? You know what they do have? A fuck ton of sugar and rum. That's what they've got. They've got a fuck ton of luxury goods. They've got Cuban cigars. They've got all this kind of stuff. But they can't really get that into the market in a serious way. And so a lot of their plantations and a lot of their infrastructure just lays idle because they can't exploit it. They can't take advantage of it, right? And if the Americans just took the battleship away, right, then they would be able to. And the number one market that they should be able to sell to would be the Americans, obviously, but they could also sell to South America. And they want to get connected to the BRI. They want to get connected to the Belt and Road Initiative. But is America just going to watch a Chinese boat float into Cuba? Are they just going to watch that happen? Probably not. Cal says, I think what Mao and the people created for China is the basis for how it didn't get corrupted. How this long-term planning isn't just an excuse for short-term benefit. Yeah, the Maoists were very aware of what could happen. Like, they knew that the system could get corrupted, and so they created a system specifically with the intention of vetting people. That's what it was all about. Like, and that's what it is still all about. That they're vetting people. They're not just letting some guy win an election. The way parties are managing is short-term. Yeah. Lost value for sure, yeah. But it's impossible to have a long-term political vision in a capitalist system. I think Switzerland is more aligned in this. I mean, places like Switzerland and what's called the Scandinavian nations, if you ask me, are the primary beneficiaries of revolutionary movements within their borders in the World War II period. That they are still benefiting from a culture where people were standing up and saying, we should get rid of these capitalists. And the capitalists gave a lot of concessions, right? And conceded a lot of power, as long as they got to keep the means of production. And that's going to regress. It's going to regress. What are my thoughts on the Uyghurs in China? Let's be serious here, Lean. You don't give a shit about the Uyghurs in China. You don't care about Muslims. Like I've got bigger opinions on this, and I could go into much greater detail. But the idea that any American or any Westerner actually gives a fuck about Muslims is a joke. We don't give a fuck about Muslims in Iraq. We don't give a fuck about Muslims in Afghanistan. We don't give a fuck about Pakistani Muslims. We don't care about Muslims when we're bombing them all across the Middle East. We don't care about them in Ethiopia or Somalia. We don't give a fuck. But if people in China try to teach Chinese to Uyghurs, it's a fucking genocide. Like, fuck off with that. Fuck off with that. It's just a waste of time to tell you that it's all bullshit. Like, there's no such thing as a secret genocide. There's no such thing as a secret genocide. When people commit genocides, they do so openly. When America goes and destroys Muslims, it says we're launching a crusade. When Hitler rises to power, he does so with a book in his hand he wrote himself called Mein Kampf that says, I'm going to round up the Jews. When we do the residential school system, we vote on it in Parliament. Genocides are enormous, huge, organizational projects. You can't do them secretly. And there isn't a single document, there isn't a single bureaucrat, There isn't a single person saying, yeah, we should eradicate these Uyghurs. It doesn't exist. It's all bullshit, not that you actually care. Bye. Good to see you, bye. What are your thoughts on social democrats? I'd like to meet one. On one hand, it's a faster way to improve living conditions for average people, but I'm worried it'll extend the life of capitalism and create a loop. That's exactly what it is. That and also it's not very serious if you ask me. That capitalists won't just give you power. They won't just give away their wealth, right? That you're not going to vote it out. Like, that's not how it's actually going to work. That social democracy is where societies end up when they finally build enough force against capitalists in order to get concessions from those capitalists. So what you end up with is something that has been called social democracy or social capitalism or something like this. That the capitalists still have the means of production. They still have the power. They still get to decide how to act and what to do. But you have healthcare now, right? There's an old age pension now, right? So you get concessions, and that's called a social democracy. They don't last very long because capitalism is a naturally regressive force. That it will always regress back towards capitalism, and then eventually collapse into feudalism, as it does. That unless you're proceeding towards communism through a process of socialism, that capitalists may give you a win. Like here in Canada, we may get dental coverage. This is something that's making the news that I haven't been reporting on, but like liberals have billions for universal dental care and federal budget. So here we go, a win, right? Social democracy wins again, right? So we're going to get universal dental care in the federal budget. Great. But we also have the Ford government attempting to privatize the healthcare system. So capitalism regresses itself. Even as the social democrats make gains, the capitalists are constantly regressing. So what you end up with is what I call the ratchet theory, right? So you vote in, you might get some social democrats, and they might ratchet up one, right? They might go click, and you might get one. But then the conservatives, i.e. the capitalists, take power, and they go click, click. They take you back two. And then it's forward one, back two. Forward one, back two. Forward one, back two. Forward one, back two. And that's what actually happens in social democracy. It's click, click, click. 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 Right? And it isn't until the communists and the socialists and the trade unions get together and go, and then the process begins anew. Right? Click, click, click. 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 And then one day, perhaps the socialists and the communists will be able to get together and just remove that wheel entirely. And that's the end of it. That the game ends, which is the goal. Yeah, capitalism is inherently short-term profit-oriented, but insofar as a long-term goal exists in bourgeois democracies, it is to preserve the system itself and the power of the capitalist class. Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly what social democracy already did after World War II. It pacified the labor movement and look where we are today, yeah. Chief Dog, hey, I saw one of your old videos from early COVID. How is your job going? I mean, it's going. It's work. It is as it is. Good opportunity to say if you want to give me $1 and try to make this my full-time job. It's in the description, right? Even $1 would help. If I can get 400 people to donate $5, I can do this as my full-time job. Like, how's my job going? I have one. That's something, I guess. It creates a loop of social democracy to neoliberalism to fascism, and then social democracy presents the quote-unquote rational choice and repeats the loop and extends capitalism. Yeah, that's what it's about, right? That at least we still have the means of production. Like, that's what it's all about. That, like, Bill Gates will give away billions of dollars and finally concede that, I guess people should have employment insurance and healthcare and all this kind of stuff, but I still control what gets made in these factories, right? The progression of history doesn't loop. You can't turn back at time. returning to post-World War II styled social democracy is impossible as the decline of capitalism is too far advanced to sustain it. I mean, right now we are in like pretty clear like free fall moments, right? Like it's pretty unlikely that like some people already believe, and I think you can successfully argue that capitalism no longer exists in America. That what we are actually looking at is a feudal structure. And I think that there is something to that. That to call what we're living under now capitalism is incorrect. That people like Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Warren Buffett, these people are no different than kings and lords of yore, right? That there is an institution that exists to negotiate what happens in the society, but in truth, all of the people involved in that project are owned completely by the ownership class, and so just essentially operate on behest and behalf of them, and for the most part, especially these Republicans, they're more or less disinterested in responding to the needs of the public, and they're more or less just using the Congress and the Senate and the presidency as just vanity projects for themselves mainly. Like they're not really actually interested in changing anything. They're not really interested in moving the needle in any serious regard. I recently watched Cody Johnston's newest one, the Some More News guy, where he talked about just what the Republicans did since they've taken power. Like, I really value that because it's very rare these days to find a news report of just like what happened, what are the events as they occurred, and what was really obvious is that it's all just petty dumb shit. Like none of it is about doing anything. It's all just a bunch of people being like, I got to put a bill forward and I'm great. I get to be the congressperson for Massachusetts. Like that's what it's all about. And so the whole system, like it's taken on the tenor of a feudal structure where there is this quote unquote democratic institution, but the institution doesn't function. And so we are all essentially serfs working for feudal lords at this point. And there is no institutional power to correct that. And it'll get worse, right? That like large money eats small money, and eventually it'll literally be like a handful of these guys, and they'll more or less use these institutions as just ways to negotiate their own spoils, as just ways to ensure that they're not stepping on each other's dicks. Like that's all. Maybe that's why fictitious capital is on the rise, because old school colonialism is getting harder and harder to do. Yeah, I think that's right. Like it's more difficult to coup a government. It's more difficult to like a place like Venezuela. You just can't send the Marines in. That you can't just send the CIA in. Like you would need a major military invasion in order to deal with what's happened in Venezuela. And so you gotta pretend like it's a dictatorship and do all that kind of bullshit. But at the end of the day, like the people of Venezuela are the ones that are in charge of Venezuela, and they keep voting Maduro. And there's a reason for that, because they know what the threat is. The reason neoliberalism replaced the post-war social democratic consensus is because the rate of profit had fallen to a point where the ruling class could no longer afford to keep up the bribes. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. I actually just do think that, like, the Russian Revolution had happened. Like, people saw it occur. And there were people outside the door being like, we can just come in there, dude. Like, we can just come in there. And so you just end up with a capitalist class that I think was scared shitless. They just were like, okay, yeah, you want old age pension? You got it. I get to keep the means of production, though, right? But, okay, old age pension. Fine. Right? Like, that's the tenor of the negotiation that happened with FDR. Yeah, you forgot the most important part. Be born into lots of wealth. Yeah, that helps. Have rich friends. Cal, or you could just pretend to live as a capitalist by watching American Psycho and saying, that's so me. Absolutely. Russia's still recovering from Napoleon. I think it's interesting how Russia recognizes how nationalizing major industry is just necessary. Yeah. Like, this is the thing. Like, that's what makes, like, Russia is in a very unique and interesting place right now. And Putin is an interesting figure that way, because Putin is not one thing. Some people call Putin a Tsarist, and some call him an imperialist, and some call him an oligarch, and some call him a capitalist, and some call him, like, he gets pegged with a lot of things. And some people think that that he is influenced by communists. Like, some people discuss him that way even. And so everybody seems to have a different opinion of Putin. And it's because I don't think the Russians necessarily have an ism that they really believe in. I think that the Russians are just Russians, and they believe in Russia. And so when they're confronted with a crisis, and if the solution to the crisis is nationalize that industry, then the people of Russia say, then nationalize it. And they just don't have the same kind of fundamentalist mindset that we have. Yeah, Putin at first wanted to join NATO, absolutely. China was invaded by Japan, lost millions of people in World War II as well. Sadly, the sacrifice of the Chinese people is even more forgotten than that of the Soviet people, absolutely. Yeah, China also went through a very deadly civil war before and after World War II. Arguably, China started from an even weaker position than Russia did, and had to overcome and endure catastrophe just as traumatic. That makes their achievements all the more amazing. Yeah, well, I mean, the Maoist period was one of constant struggle, just constant. Like, they went to war. Like, the Maoists went to war, man. Like, they were not fucking around. Cuba wants Americans to come to the country. America stops its own citizens from going to Cuba because they don't want them to see a real alternative. Yeah. I know that when I was in Cuba, they were just handing us the Communist Manifesto constantly. They were literally just like, here's the Communist Manifesto. Eric, good evening. Good evening to you, bud. I spent the last 2 hours typing on my cell phone using the 14 points of fascism and why the conservative libertarian are fascist, but the Stalin Biden are not. Are you interested in reading? I mean, you could put it you could put it up on the Discord, bud, and I'll take a look at it. The reality is that the Soviets made mistakes. It was inevitable. It was the first time any nation had tried to move forward on Marxist ideas. The idea that they're not going to make mistakes is silly. It was the first time in history of the world that the proletariat had come to power. The first try at building a socialist society. Exactly. Dollars to donuts that if the embargo on Cuba was lifted, you would have Cuba flourish without a hybrid of petite capitalist markets and a strong nationalized heavy industry. And they would flourish. Yeah, I think there's a hunger. There's a hunger in Cuba, for sure. They want to improve their society. They want it. Like, they really, really want it. It's just they've kind of hit a wall, right? They've kind of hit a wall. Content genocide. Exhibit A is the rolling back of women's autonomy. Exhibit B is the anti-LGBTQ legislation in basically all of the United States. Yeah, you want to talk about genocide? Count the pills and laws. Yeah. Hopefully China won't make the same mistakes. Yeah, we'll see. China's entering an interesting period. Like, post-war China, like there's a war coming between China and America, and the war that's happening right now between Russia and America. It's going to be it'll be very interesting to see what China looks like after that. Yeah, that's all I'll say about it. Like, but once those wars are settled, what's it all going to look like? Held against women and sexual minorities, count the anti-black policies, count the reservations. Yeah, Americans are surrounded by genocide. Well, the country is founded on genocide. Like, the genocide of the First Nations people. Like, if not for the genocide of the First Nations people, America doesn't exist. Right? Like, and you've got, like, major civilizations that were eradicated in order by capitalists in order to get America. Like, there used to be civilizations like the Mayans and the Incans and the Aztec in South America, right? You had major First Nations peoples that lived in North America, just absolutely eradicated. So this idea that we're concerned about genocide in other nations is a joke. The opioid crisis, yeah. General Craggs. Yeah, me personally, I'm fine with the anti-black stuff. Bye, General Craggs. We don't need a Nazi in chat. And we don't need an idiot in chat either. Name us a communist country that succeeded, sir. China. China is a center of capital and business. You're just clueless, dude. That's all. You're just clueless. It's fine. Why should we tip you if you believe in communism? Yeah, the classic. Oh, you don't think feudalism is good, and yet you eat the Lord's grain. I'm very serious. We got a real Ben Shapiro guy in chat right here. Yeah, I'm not going to worry about these idiots. They're too stupid. Like, if you're too stupid to understand that you need to talk to people with respect, then you're too stupid to have a conversation with. Like, just too stupid, right? Like, there are people who worship stupidity, and then there are people who really embrace the life of stupidity, who actually think that the way to talk to people is by saying dumb shit and making yourself look like an idiot. Just very, very silly. Just very, very silly. I've got a new one here by Rainer Shea. I love reading Rainer's stuff. The foundational lies behind the U.S. empire's campaign to demonize China. I call the hoaxes explored here the foundational modern anti-Chinese myths, because since I wrote this reblogged essay 4 years ago, they've provided the ideological basis for all the new lies imperialism's narrative managers have added on. The ideas that China has been violating Taiwan's sovereignty, committing atrocities against LGBT people, and providing weapons to Russia are all only believable if one already accepts the assertions that preceded them. Since Washington's sanctions on Russia have failed to destabilize Eurasia, China at this point isn't in danger of being destroyed. But combating psyops against it is still crucial for revolution in the imperial center, since the people won't embrace socialism if they continue to associate it with the crimes socialist China has been falsely accused of. And breaking imperialism's narrative control is a vital step towards rendering the imperial state vulnerable to internal revolt. Americans are being manipulated by a campaign to make us consent to what's effectively a paradigm of constant war with China. It's not a clear-cut case of preparing the public for a direct military invasion against the targeted country, as was the case with the Iraq WMD hoax. It's the same situation to that of the U.S. empire's recent campaign against Russia, a series of media demonizations against the disfavored country, which manufacture support for economic warfare and military buildup. It's also part of the real motive behind the anti-Russian propaganda effort. In order to maintain its hegemony in an increasingly multipolar world, the United States needs to work to undermine both China and its allies. We're witnessing a vast series of hostility that the U.S. is directing against superpowers which it was formerly ambivalent towards, with the potential consequence being an eventual outbreak of world war. But Americans won't see this if they don't question the motives behind the headlines they read about China. Modern anti-Chinese propaganda primarily works through the reliable psychological manipulation tactic of getting someone to feel sympathy for another person. If an American has been told that the people of China are being oppressed by an Orwellian tracking system, or that China is committing genocide against a religious group, they'll be likely to support the empire's attacks against China and see anyone who questions these narratives as a shameful apologist for an evil government. Alleging spectacular Chinese atrocities without providing evidence. For a time, I bought into these narratives about China. It's easy to buy into them when the news you're exposed to repeats them so ubiquitously, and often subtly. Then I found that a big part of the reason we're now supposed to hate the Chinese government, the social credit system, is based in wild distortions and hyperbole. We've all encountered the language about the social credit system. We've heard that it's something out of a sci-fi dystopia, that it makes the Chinese people live in fear of a totalitarian government. But then I encountered a commentator who approaches the issue with an objective lens. the China Daily contributor and socialist pundit Ian Goodrum. In March, Goodrum tweeted that when it comes to the social credit system, people outside of China should stop using facile pop culture references to demonize countries you haven't bothered to understand. His arguments began as followed. First, some background on why the system exists. In China, a FICO-like system, like what the US has, wouldn't be very useful, as very few Chinese are debt holders. Most people don't take out loans for major purchases. They save instead. Also, and probably more importantly, before the system existed, there wasn't a unified set of consequences for businesses who failed to pay fines, uphold agreements, or generally hold to acceptable standards of conduct. Unless the offense was criminal, few punishments existed. This context is helpful, but less relevant when it comes to the reporting about the system in the Western press. You've seen the headlines, Black Mirror is real, God help us all, etc. And as Goodrum illustrated, the actual consequences of this regulatory system are very mundane. The penalties related to investment and finance violations are establishing restrictions in financial companies, restrictions on issuing bonds, restrictions on qualified investor status, restrictions on the issues of shares, and restrictions on establishing social organizations. Others include bannings on becoming a civil servant and becoming a manager in state-owned enterprise. These are sensible punishments that are most likely to affect high-income investors who have violated laws and ethics. The description for the laws under the social credit system also say that people can be penalized with restrictions on riding trains and aircraft and restrictions on conspicuous consumptions travel, as Goodrum assesses about the details of these penalties. In other words, if you're on the bad credit list, you can't buy first-class plane tickets or luxury train tickets. You also can't engage in conspicuous consumption travel or send your kids to expensive private schools. Wow, just like that Netflix show. And when looking over the contents of the social credit system's rules about restricting train travel, Goldrum wrote, to sum up, the first set of violations is for specific rules related to train travel, like the issuing of fraudulent tickets or scalping. This is a universal ban from ticket purchases. The second list is a broader one, which carries the high-class punishments we saw earlier. The broader list includes the things you might expect, like financial deception or fraud, but also includes not paying out Social Security or employing entities who don't. How terrible that they should be punished with a seat on a C- or D-class bullet train instead of G-class. The Western media's sensationalism around mundane regulatory systems has a clear agenda behind it. Last year, in reaction to a tweet by the author Nicholas Christakis, which hilariously described China's social system as so dystopian and authoritarian as to defy belief, the shameless war promoter Bill Kristol tweeted, "Shouldn't an important U.S. foreign policy goal of the next couple of decades be regime change in China?" Kristol was echoing the sentiments of his allies in the State Department, the Pentagon, and the U.S. intelligence establishment. Replacing, or at least successfully strong-arming, China's government would be a salvation for the U.S. empire, which is desperate for loyal allies as American influence rapidly declines around the globe. And as China continues to economically outpace the U.S., we're going to keep seeing attempts from politicians and the mass media to make us hate and fear China's government. Another line that's used for this is the one about China holding 1 million Uyghur Muslims in internment camps. This charge has largely originated from a Reuters article from last August, which reads, UN says it has credible reports that China holds millions of Uyghurs in secret camps. Reuters' claim was repeated uncritically by the American media, including The Intercept. But in fact, a spokesperson for the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights has told the Gray Zone that the United Nations did not make this claim. It was made by an independent committee, which did not speak for the UN as a whole, which was made by Gay McDougall, the sole American member of that committee. These allegations, which McDougall didn't even cite any sources for, have been expanded upon by claims from the network of Chinese human rights defenders, an opposition group that spent years consistently advocating against the Chinese government while promoting extreme right opposition figures in alternative to the Chinese Communist Party. These efforts to promote outrageous claims of anti-Muslim atrocities by the Chinese government belie the reality of the situation with Chinese Uyghurs. In fact, the Muslims who have been recently detained are the ones who have been involved in an illegal operation to funnel money from Wahhabist extremist groups into Chinese mosques. These events have not contradicted the Chinese government's stated commitment to uphold the rights of all religious and ethnic groups, commitments which wouldn't be consistent with the nationalistic campaign by China to create support for the persecution of a certain group. China has a bevy of laws which protects the expression of religious belief and which outlaw discrimination on the basis of religion. This is because the principle of ethnic unity is a major part of the Chinese Communist Party's ideals, and it's shown this by allowing efforts by major institutions to train and educate Muslim students, mostly Uyghurs, in Islam. The claim that China is eradicating Islam is utterly absurd. Like others in the American and independent journalism community, I've spent much of the last couple of years defending Russia from the encyclopedia of lies that the new Cold Warriors have directed against it. But what doesn't get nearly as much attention from anti-imperialist voices is the propaganda that we're fed about China. And the anti-Chinese hoaxes that have been carried out by the Western media are about as big as the ones about Russia. As the author, Godfrey Roberts, recently concluded, China is being framed in an atrocity story sustained by artful censorship and loud, proud, bold, and brassy propaganda. An expansive, in-your-face, preposterous conspiracy sustained for 2 years at great financial and reputational cost to the nation. Wildly ambitious, batshit crazy, and so self-destructive as to boggle the mind, it was one of many propaganda-driven frame-ups, another of which in progress as you read these lines. It checks all the boxes: big, bold, loud and proud, expensive, in your face, a preposterous hoax, daringly ambitious, and utterly self-destructive. Roberts is referring to the claim that the Chinese government censorship program exists to suppress criticism of the state. As Roberts describes, China's chief censor Wang Hunan in many ways does the opposite of this. His online policies are focused on rooting out shady and dangerous behavior, such as infringement, libel, scamming, and spreading viruses. And Harvard's Gary King has assessed about the political aspects of Hunan's rules that dissent is very much permitted. Contrary to much research and commentary, the purpose of the censorship program is not to suppress criticism of the state of the Communist Party. Indeed, despite widespread censorship of social critics, we find that when Chinese people write scathing criticisms of their government and its leaders, the probability that their post will be censored does not increase. Instead, censored tweets were equally likely to be against the state, for the state, irrelevant, or factual reports about events. Negative, even vitriolic criticism of the state, its leaders, and its policies are not more likely to be censored. At their core, the Western denunciations of China's censorship program are based in xenophobia. For 2,000 years, China's chief censor has been a designated public intellectual within Chinese society, one whose role is rooted in the Confucian idea that censorship is important for order. Censorship is an honored practice in China, and it operates under public scrutiny. The attacks against China's censorship program upset Roberts so much because, as he writes, the China hoax frames China's Confucian politics and economics as if they were, or should be, Roman, creating support for war while censoring those who object. When the United States has its people aghast at these fabricated horrors from the Chinese government, it can get regular Americans to share the U.S. empire's desires for great power competition. Recent American fears of China outdoing us as a nation, which have been capitalized on by Donald Trump with his rhetoric about how China is killing us, provide the foundation for cultivating war hysteria among the American public. The recent Western demonizations of Russia have gone alongside media warnings that America is falling behind China militarily, like was the case with a Reuters article from last month, which had the headline, China's Challenge. Xi's army is replacing the U.S. as Asia's mightiest. The headline was next to an appropriately menacing drawing of the Chinese president in front of a red-colored crowd of soldiers. Ian Goldrum reacted to the headline by writing, "The U.S. has the biggest military budget in the world, more than the next 7 countries combined. Yet articles like this are being pushed constantly in an effort to convince you China is the real threat. Don't fall for their scam." Trump's trade war is just one aspect of how the American ruling class is using this manufactured anti-China sentiment to enact measures to harm China. Unlike the tariffs, America's sanctions against China have universal support from the political establishment. This is more or less also the case for America's efforts to militarily intimidate China, along with its allies, Russia and North Korea, through war games and military buildup. By the definition of war as something that starts when two nations enter into hostile economic, diplomatic, and military relations, the US and China are currently at war, and they'll continue to be so indefinitely. As a consequence, the atmosphere within the United States has come to largely consist of anti-Chinese paranoia, which will only intensify as the war heats up. Last year, at a U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee hearing, politicians and officials used racist and McCarthyist rhetoric to construct a narrative of vast Chinese efforts to destroy the very foundations of America. Marco Rubio alleged that there's a counterintelligence risk poised to U.S. national security from Chinese students, particularly those in advanced programs in the sciences and mathematics, based on the claim that Beijing is sending spies into American schools. Other senators pressed intelligence officials about supposed Chinese and Russian efforts to sow divisions within American society. This paranoia about China influencing American politics was expanded upon when Trump claimed last year, without evidence, that China was interfering in the 2018 elections, and when Trump claimed this week that China wants a Democrat to win in 2020. And like the hysteria around Russian meddling, it's used to manufacture consent both for military buildup and for censorship against dissent. The unprecedented measures to politically censor the internet that Western governments and corporations have carried out in the last several years under the guise of fighting foreign meddling have only added to the paradigm of political censorship, which has long existed throughout the West. In his recent China article, Godfrey Roberts reported that he and other China-friendly commentators have frequently had their voices silenced in a media environment that only favors negative stories about China, and that generally silence opposition to the pro-corporate, pro-imperialist narratives which the centers of powers in America seek to push. Dissenting voices and nuanced perspectives always come under attack during wartime, and America's 21st century's Cold War with Russia and China is producing a high-tech version of the McCarthy era, where fake news and illegitimate content are swept away by an unaccountable circle of oligarchic censors. The Americans' left's complicity in the anti-Chinese campaign. Ironically, this reality of intensive political censorship within America is exactly the kind of authoritarian vision that American propaganda makes China out to be. The American criminal justice system effectively works as America's own social credit system, one so harsh that it often makes people lose their voting rights or employment opportunities for breaking the most trivial laws. As America accuses China of human rights abuses, the United States itself is persecuting Muslims throughout policies like Trump's anti-Muslim travel ban, and U.S. immigration officials are putting migrant children into unsafe and abusive detention camps. And while American propagandists misleadingly deride China as a dictatorship, the U.S. government is thoroughly controlled by a dictatorship of corporations and billionaires. A version of this American double standard mentality about China is what causes many of those on the American left to reinforce the anti-Chinese narratives. Western socialists so often join in the attitude of hostility towards China's government and the imperialist narratives that go along with this attitude because they refuse to acknowledge that China's government is in fact socialist. The Communist Party may have a problem with corruption and may not be as ideologically pure as it once was, but it continues to get legitimacy from the class of workers and peasants who brought it into being, and Marxist-Leninism continues to be its guiding principle. It's only incorporated markets and private sector institutions into society in recent decades, because at this moment in history, this move increases production, drives innovation, and creates peace with the capitalist world. A socialist state can still be socialist, while allowing for capital to function in this way, so long as it doesn't let capital become politically dominant. And in China, this still hasn't happened. The Communist Party is still in charge of the economy, and the public sector still dominates. The government is never afraid to jail or even kidnap millionaires and billionaires, and the party has carried out a poverty alleviation program whose success is unparalleled in human history, with it having lifted 800 million people out of poverty since the 1970s alone. These efforts to uphold socialism by the Communist Party aren't contradicted by China's recent arrests of Marxist students, which the Western media has rather suspiciously emphasized. Of the few dozen students who've been arrested have not been targeted for advocating for better working conditions or higher wages, but for trying to form an independent trade union, which is illegal, since all Chinese unions must be affiliated with the All China Federation of Trade Unions. It's very odd that these labor organizers responded to the alleged poor treatment of workers by the JASTIC Technology Management by engaging in this legally reckless activity, whereas they could more easily have demanded that JASTIC correct its behavior. After all, workers' struggles to make companies treat its employees better have often succeeded throughout history, and they're especially likely to be successful within China's aggressively socialistic system of government. But the story of the JASTIC incident is used as one of the talking points that Western leftists bring up in order to dismiss the legitimacy of China's socialism. China is a vast country with around 1.3 billion people, and a number of internal nations effectively exist within the unified Chinese banner. Parts of it are more revolutionized than others, with South China in particular being home to some of the most exploitation due to it having been under imperialist colonialism for the longest time. Even if the Communist Party were to become ideologically pure in the minds of Western leftists, they'd likely still not accept modern China as socialist, because not all of the country meets acceptable socialist standards. This arrogant Western disregard for the achievements of China's communists stems from the same privileged worldview that causes leftists in colonial countries to oppose the world's actually existing socialist states. Those on the American left frequently claim that socialist states which have struggled for their liberation from Cuba to the USSR to the DPRK don't represent real socialism. In doing this, they grant arguing points to the anti-communists while repeating the dishonest imperialist narratives about their countries. This is something that Trotskyists in particular have been guilty of doing throughout history. Once again, we see this happening as America left largely Once again, we see this happening as the American left largely repeats the lies about China. One can find socialist publications like the World Socialist website, whose allegiances are notably Trotskyist, repeating the narratives about China committing genocide against Muslims, while absurdly alleging that the Communist Party today has repudiated all the principles on which it was established. Such disingenuous complicity with the imperialist narratives about China is hypocritical for the WSWS to embrace. It's similar in nature to the nationalistic, anti-Chinese rhetoric of pro-capitalist socialists, like Bernie Sanders, who the WSW has rightly criticized for endorsing an agenda of economic warfare against China. The American left must wholly reject the anti-Chinese narratives, both from the imperialist propaganda center and from the Trotskyist strains which seek to undermine international solidarity with Chinese communists. The struggle against imperialist war needs to be infused with a willingness to support all of one's fellow socialists. And if we keep working to educate people about the pro-war narratives around China, a shift in consciousness could happen. As Godfrey Roberts has observed, there is high and growing interest in fact-based China news, and growing suspicion of a frame-up. There is also, as we see daily in these pages, a growing awareness of our own censorship regime through a lack of knowledge about its makeup and authority. Let's work to unify the global poor and working classes and mobilize them towards fighting against the US-NATO imperialism that's driving us into a third world war. Man, that was a struggle, that one. I'll admit it. I was flubbing all over the place on that one. Always good to read Rainer, though. Always good to read Rainer. Hope you guys are doing well. Pluck, could you get an invite to my Discord? You get invited to the Discord if you donate to the Patreon. That's how that works. Even $1. So if you like, share, subscribe, and make sure you donate to the Patreon. If you got $1 jangling around your pocket, make this my full-time job, guys. Good opportunity to say, like, if you want this to be my full-time job, if you want me to be doing this, not just doing the stream, but also getting involved politically, locally, also getting involved and moving forward along political lines, well, the way to do that is to make this my full-time job, and the way to do that is to donate to my Patreon. Thank you. Yeah. Zian, exactly. You're concerned with air quality, yet you continue to breathe. I'm very smart. Yeah. Handsome boy. Hello from Russia. Oh, good to see you, bud. Oh, I remember you being here before, bud. I'm afraid that the USA is provoking Russia to nuke, yeah, because they're so arrogant and selfish. I haven't seen entire my life such irresponsible. Yeah, you're right, dude. That the leaders from the West are absolutely acting irresponsibly. It's crazy. And it's because the West is in this hyper decline and they don't know what else to do. For those who think that having a bunker and a bunch of canned food will survive, forget about it. No one will survive. Don't be so naive. Absolutely. Like, absolutely, dude. Like, I think that what the West is doing is out of desperation alone. That they're not thinking what they're doing through. Really simply. Cal, China is really doing what every Western country has already done, trying to rein in its people into a more central standard culture, all speaking the same language. And I mean, it's easier for China to do that simply because they're a much older civilization, right? And like, let's not fool ourselves about what's going on. Like, it's been a long time since I've actually just done a Google Maps, like, I don't know why this doesn't hit the discourse ever. Like, why is it that we don't actually talk about this? Well, I know why we don't talk about this. Like, that's Afghanistan. Is there something that's happened in Afghanistan over the last 20 years, guys? Is there some kind of major event that occurred in Afghanistan over the last 20 years? Hey, that's Xinjiang. Hey, what do you think has happened? Right? What do you think has happened? Do you think a bunch of Muslims walked through the Wakhan corridor? Right? And then once you start to understand the history with Tajikistan and the Eastern Islamic Independence Movement and the Islamic terrorist organizations that exist within Xinjiang, you start to really understand what's actually going on. That China is dealing with Islamic terrorists within its own borders. And its solution is, hey, let's create vocational schools and try to give these people some skills so they can get integrated with China. Well, when America is faced with a similar crisis, a similar immigration crisis, what's its solution? Its solution is to round people up, deport them, fucking shoot them, bomb them, right? China chooses not to do that. Must be a genocide, right? Completely fucking normal. Totally fucking normal. It's absolutely normal what we're doing. Total genocide, what an abomination. What a major crisis, right? Corrupt Dark. Don't know if I've ever seen you here before, bud. Good to see you. Opinion on Mountain Dew food. Poisoning. I haven't heard about it, dude. Let me just type it into Google. Mountain Dew food. Boy, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Our food is, like, I mean, our food is poisoned. Like, and, like, first of all, if you're drinking Mountain Dew, you're drinking poison in the first place. Like, our food is poisonous. Like, I don't know why we need to even say it. Like, our food is poisonous. We eat and drink poison all the time. We're littered with microplastics, right? Like, we've just allowed the same psychopaths who are trying to convince us that it's cool to smoke, that it's healthy to smoke. Your doctor's smoking, telling everybody, yeah, it's cool to smoke. We've given those people the same abilities, but with our food. And they're telling us all kinds of dumb bullshit, and they're lying to us about everything. Yeah, it's completely normal to eat 5 pounds of glabaflab in a day. Like, yeah, you know what? A diet with corn syrup in it is a healthy diet. Like, these guys are psychopaths. They're obviously lying to us, and they're poisoning us. That's all. And we just keep letting it do. I've been noticing that whenever Westerners talk about Chinese ethnic minorities, they never refer or consider them as Chinese, even though their nationality is Chinese. Yet they want to drive a wedge. No, I mean, the hard truth is that they don't really care about these Muslims. Like, if they cared about Muslims, they never would have invaded Iraq or Afghanistan. They'd stop bombing Somalia. They'd stop bombing Ethiopia, right? They'd stop destroying the Sudan. They'd stop funding a genocide in Yemen. They'd stop fucking destroying the Palestinians, right? Like, the idea that any American anywhere actually gives a fuck about the Uyghurs is a joke. It's a total fucking joke. Like, I remember, like, when I first started this, I used to give all of the arguments for the Uyghur thing, right? I used to do all that kind of stuff, right? Put in all the points, create all the arguments, all that. But there's no reason to. The truth is that it's bullshit. Like, no American gives a fuck. They don't care. They obviously don't care. The only reason they're feigning caring about this is because it fuels their xenophobia against China. And that's the hard truth. That if people are standing up actually being like, we've got to worry about the Uyghurs. The Uyghurs, we're so actually concerned about the Uyghurs. While they literally fund organizations to massacre Muslims across the Middle East. Like, get the fuck out of here. Like, get the fuck out of here. They're just so bloodthirsty for war that they're looking for any excuse. And this is a perfect excuse because it makes them feel as though they care. They're like, we're the good guys. We're actually doing this for the good of the Uyghur people because we care. This lets us murder millions of Chinese. Millions of Chinese will die, but we're good because we care about the Muslims. Like, shut the fuck up, you psychos. Transylvanian, it is pretty evident that one of the West's main goals when it comes to China and Russia is to break both of these countries like they did to the USSR and Yugoslavia by stoking ethnic conflicts. Yeah. Mr. Cheese Monkey, it has been a while, bud. I've been good. I've been good, man. Make sure you like the stream. Donate $1. Transylvanian, divide and conquer is, after all, one of the oldest strategies in the book. Absolutely, dude. Yeah, I mean, exactly, handsome boy. They're very worried about Muslims in China. Meanwhile, how many Muslims were killed in Iraq, Syria, Libya, absolutely, Yemen. Yeah. Cotton, I had a Mountain Dew today. Fight me. No, dude, I don't think so. I'm not going to fight you. I'm worried about catching your Mountain Dew. Oh, well, Mr. Cheeseburger, I was kind of joking about that, but that's very kind of you. Thank you, bud. I appreciate it. Well, and you know what, man? With that, we've reached the end of the stream. So thank you, Mr. Cheese Monkey, for your donation. Like, share, subscribe, right? If you want to donate to my Patreon, it gets you into the Discord. Even $1 helps. If you're only donating $1, maybe make it $2. And always remember, guys, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.